Welcome everybody to the August meeting of the Early Television Museum community. Dave is not going to be able to make it. Sika is not going to be able to make it tonight, so I will give his part of his courtesy talk anyway. Please keep your computers and phones muted unless you're saying something, so we eliminate being interrupted by background noise. I want to thank the New Jersey Antique Radio Club for sponsoring this meeting and providing the Zoom feed. We really appreciate it. We don't have a presentation tonight, so it's going to just be an open forum. So there'll be plenty of time to talk about everything. I'm going to briefly go through our report for the museum. A few significant things have happened. We have board of directors met last week and decided to change our admission policy. We've been on a voluntary policy of $5 admission for adults and $2 for kids since we've been open. And though virtually everybody has made that donation, it's less than 5% of people don't donate to get in. The board decided to go ahead and raise our rates and make it a required admission rather than a voluntary one. So starting next weekend, our admission charge is going to be $10 for adults, $8 for seniors and active duty military personnel, and $5 for kids. So we'll be implementing that next week. I don't anticipate any problems with it. I know a couple of the other museums, including Chuck's museum, have gone to something similar or identical with absolutely no effect on attendance. And it'll be a significant increase in revenue, which we can always use. Second thing I want to talk about is that we are implementing QR codes on I don't know how many sets, but initially probably about 30 or 40 sets in the museum's collection. There'll be QR codes on the display signs we have, and they will take you to a short slideshow that tells you something about the set. And not too long. They're typically about 5 minutes long. So anyone coming in with a tablet or phone can get access to it. We got about 10 of the codes done now, and we're testing it. Real easy to do. We're using AI generated computer voices to read the script, and they really sound almost lifelike now. Occasionally you can tell that they're computers, but basically they sound very lifelike. And so we're using that for generating the text. The QR code also gives you an option of going to our web page about that particular set. So you either through the slideshow or through the web page, you can learn more about it. Our sweepstakes, we are almost $8,000 in ticket sales. I have no doubt we'll pass that. We'll probably get, last year, I think we got about 12,000, and I think we'll probably do about the same. A lot of the ticket sales are in the last month, and we still got over a month and a half to go until the drawing. So we'll be advertising that more and offering discounts, bonus tickets and so forth to try to get the sales up. But I have no doubt we'll meet our $8,000 minimum for awarding the prize. The final thing I wanted to mention is our fall swap meet. It's going to be October 14th, 10 to 4. The museum will have some sets to sell, but not a lot. We're just a few sets that have been donated since the convention that we want to get rid of. And we will be at 2 p.m. We'll be having the drawing for the sweepstakes, and then we'll put that on live on YouTube so people can see it. In terms of donations to the museum, we haven't gotten much since our last meeting. We got a very nicely done scanning disc replica that a guy here in Columbus put together using modern parts. It's got the motor is out of is a phonograph motor. I haven't looked at it yet because I'm not back in Columbus, but I will be soon, and it's probably be a good display item to show how it works, how mechanical TV works, and something we can run 24 hours a day without worrying about, or not, during the hours we're open anyway, not worrying about, wearing out some not hard to find or impossible to find part. So that's all I've got to say about the museum. Does anybody have any comments or questions before we move on?
Is that replica actually working? Does it display something?
I don't know. I assume it can. It looks complete. It's a 60-line disc.
Hello, Steve.
I don't know.
Steve?
Yeah. Yes.
Can I comment on that?
Sure.
The best way I can describe it is a working display model where you can see one working, but it doesn't actually work where you will see an image. Does that help to answer the question?
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you, Larry.
All right.
Any other observations, comments, questions? Well, why don't we, is there anybody new that has not been on a meeting before that would like to introduce themselves?
I'm relatively new. I'm Robert Manning. I'm here in Cleveland, Ohio. I used to be senior scientist at the local NASA facility and I retired about 2 years ago. And I've always been interested in television. Believe it or not, I have a strange collection affinity. I like to collect schematic diagrams of old television transmitters. Very interesting to start from the early transmitters and see through the development of vacuum tubes and things like that, how the circuitry evolved and stuff like that from the beginning days on and on. So I collect schematic diagrams.
Huh. Very interesting. I wonder, would you be willing to let us scan some of them, put them on our website?
Well, in fact, I donated one to you already.
Oh, you did?
You have one. I sent you one of RCA's first TT-10A television transmitter.
Oh, yep.
1948.
I remember that. Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
But I do have some other ones I can
Perfect.
scan in. But I'm always looking for some. So if people have some, I'll be willing to copy them or whatever.
Oh. Well, welcome. Glad to see you here tonight.
Thank you.
Then let's move on to our featured item of the night. Let's see, can whoever is controlling the meeting, could you put Larry's phone on the screen?
That would be me, Steve. I'm gonna try to do
Okay.
that right now.
It's the Samsung SM so whatever. There we go. Well, I thought I'd show you something a little bit funky tonight. We got this recently. It was on Facebook Marketplace for $50. And it was about near Dayton, about 50, 60 miles from here. And I thought it'd be sort of fun to pick it up and put it on display. This is the television transmitter assembly. It's not the transmitter itself, but it's everything else but the transmitter of a ham radio operator from Westerville, Ohio. And think this dates from the 50s. He was, his name was Richard Gibson, and he broadcast television in the 430 megahertz, around 430 megahertz amateur band, starting in the 50s. And I think he did it for a long time. He died, and this thing ended up in the in this junk collector's barn way out in the country. And it has, Larry, go down to the bottom. Keep one, okay, right there. Okay, that is a, and I don't know if he built this or if it was equipment that was available to buy. It's awfully professionally built. You can see the lettering on that is engraved. It's got official looking numbers on it and so forth, but no identification of who it's from. But anyway, this is a flying spot scanner where he originated his video. As far as we know, he didn't have a camera. Right above that slot is where this a slide goes in, right? There you go, right there. That's where a slide goes in. Then there's right above that is a switcher. Yeah, there's a slide. Pull the slide out. I think that's got his call sign on it. You can see it. Whoops. Yep. So that was his. That was his ID slide that he put on. Going on up, he had a. There was also a. Hold on just a second.
Hey, Steve.
Yeah.
Is there any way that your guy there could like open that blind spot scanner up that we can just see what the inside kind of looks like?
Yeah, Larry, can you go around to the back? I think it's open already. The back bottom. You should be able to move that rack out. It's not terribly heavy.
The reason I'm asking, I was just curious. You know, Syncor or whoever it was used to make one for a TV test jig for TV shots. And I wondered if he took one of those and customized it or something.
Could be. He'll swap it around.
Okay, thank you.
You'll be able to see.
Back in the early 1960s, there was a schematic on how to build one. I think in Popular Electronics or something. Because I built one. It didn't work very well, but I built one.
Okay.
It was a science project when I was in high school.
Right.
So this may be. I wouldn't be surprised if this guy built it. It kind of looks like it, and he was a pretty good craftsman apparently.
Yeah. So going down to the bottom, Larry. Keep going. There you go. There it is. Can you see anything from that?
See the photo multiplier tube, I think.
See the
Yeah,
Area
looks-
931A is.
and there's the CRT. You can see.
Yeah, it looks very similar to that test thing that was it
Yeah.
Syncor that built that or
No,
what?
it was B&K that made
Yeah,
it.
B&K.
that's it.
But no,
I can't-
that's homemade. I'm pretty sure, and the guy was pretty good at homemade. I think.
I think so too. Right.
It doesn't look like anything that would be able to project a live image, just that slide in front.
Yeah, it just scans the slide. The CRT provides the scanning, and the photo multiplier tube makes the video.
Right. Also in this rack, he's got a TV set, you can show the back of that. It's just a standard set, nothing unusual about it. That it was his monitor, and at the very top, he has a Viking tape recorder, which was his audio source. And there it is right there. And then there are a number of other little chassis that came with this. There's what appears to be there's some audio amplifier stuff. That's right. I think that's what that is right there. Also homemade. Below that, you could see the switcher that he used. I don't know what he switched exactly. And there also a chassis that would look like an RF preamp for receiving signals, I would guess. Now, the transmitter is somewhere else. I don't know where it, if it's a different rack or what, but I think that's sort of interesting that, you know, there are all kinds of little pieces of TV history around. Anybody have any questions about this?
Oh, lots of them. I'd like to play with it, actually.
Right.
Is that an Admiral TV? I'm not
looks
sure.
like
The knobs look like Admiral. At least.
Admiral.
It is an Admiral?
Yeah, the knobs look like the Admiral.
Look like Admiral, yeah.
Right. They do indeed.
Right.
And Viking used to sell that deck without, you could buy it with or without electronics. And there were lots of schematics in some of the magazines on how to make the record and playback amplifiers. Oh yeah, it says Admiral right there on the
Yeah,
logo.
right.
So, okay, well, so we ID'd that right.
And actually,
Right.
it notes it has a color adapter on it.
Does it?
Yeah, the
Yeah, that's the
there's a little
RCA
RCA input
connector
there that shows it was color capable for the CBS system.
So it had to be a 51 model. That's about what it looks like. Any other questions, observations?
You like Dumont green, apparently. I mean, he painted it to look like Dumont stuff. And
All right.
I noticed that he wrapped friction tape around the photomultiplier tube so he could narrow the area of light from the CRT that was hitting it.
Uh-huh.
yeah, keep out the room light, otherwise you're going to get. It's not going to work.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
normally put a shield around that, but that was the easy way to do it, I guess.
Hey, whatever works, you know.
Right.
Yeah, there's schematics for all that in the ham radio specialized communication techniques book that I have.
On those flying spot scanner things that B&K had, I remember when I was much younger, when I was first exposed to one, I thought they had a bad picture tube in it. But it uses a tube with a very low persistent, or what am I saying here, high persistent, you know, it looks like a dim purple picture on it. Does anybody know which phosphor that was?
That it's an ultraviolet tube, I understand.
You know, like they have P1, P4 phosphors,
Yeah.
P11s and all that. I just wondered, what was the P rating on that one?
I seem to remember P11, but you'd have to double check.
Did you say P11?
Yes.
Because all that photomultiplier tube has to do is just follow that little dot there, and it
Yeah.
took that type of phosphor to handle that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we use the same kind of phosphor in the flying spot scanner for CBS's video player. That the EVR system that used 8mm microfilm.
Yeah, it was actually divided down the middle with the chrominance on one side and the luminance on the other side.
Yep, and a vertical sink in the center.
I remember in all the ham radio clubs and stuff, they're always talking about televising, you know, television and ham radio back in the late 60s and so forth. And I don't think it went over that well. Nobody wanted to get that in depth with it, but apparently this guy did, that he could, you know, put his call letters on a CRT screen there, which is interesting.
When I lived in Dallas, it was fairly active back in the 70s and 80s. It works out as cable channel, I don't know, 21 or something like that. I forgot. But if you had a cable ready TV and connected up to an antenna and switch it to cable, you could pick those guys up. And Saturday morning, they'd be pretty busy, actually. Some were even broadcasting color.
In the 50s, the surplus market was flooded with that military airborne military bomb camera that we have, the iconoscope camera. You could buy those for nothing, and a lot of hams bought them and used them for ham TV. A lot of articles about how to, in fact, how we got our instructions on how to make ours work came from an article in QST, I think, about using that camera for television.
Hey, Steve,
Yeah.
can Larry show that camera for a minute? I have something I'd like to mention.
Which one is that?
The military camera.
Yeah, Larry, can you do that?
Which one are we talking about?
It's in the pre-war American room, the TV camera that's back around behind the curtain.
All surplus stores had that camera for about, I think, $50 back in the mid 50s. And when I lived in Seattle, Washington, a guy up there named Norm Alquist, one of the smartest guys I've ever known, that was what he was experimenting with, and his worked quite well. And I have the camera that he made, another one there, but that I think I've got about a half a dozen of those military cameras that I've found over the years and saved, and some spare tubes for them too.
Doesn't the iconoscope need extremely bright light to form a useful image?
That was one of their sort of downfalls. It wasn't that bad, but the early iconoscope cameras required a lot of light in the studios. And all of the actors and performers would complain because back then they had those 1,000 watt tungsten bulbs there, and they were like infrared heaters up there, and everybody'd be sweating to death in a TV studio.
Larry, around the corner.
Steve, something else about the that phosphor on that tube. Photomultiplier's response is highest in the blue and ultraviolet, so that would be a reason for picking that.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, so when I was in high school, one of my high school buddies' uncle owned a surplus store, and I got one of those things for about $25, as I recall from him. And but you had to build your own power supply. It had a dynamotor in it, and I found it worked really well if I took the lens out and took my dad's slide projector, which is 500 watts, and just focused it on the target inside that tube. That made a pretty good picture then, but otherwise it was it needed a bunch of light. But those are designed to be in drone aircraft, so up at 30,000 feet or something, it's pretty bright up there. So I guess it worked.
They were designed.
Well, it didn't work very well. They had issues. They had all kinds of issues. One of them was when the camera went into a cloud. They completely lost the ability. They didn't know where they were. They were flying blind, and they didn't have stable systems in the drone to keep it going straight. So it'd come out of the cloud, and no telling which direction it would be going, and where it would be going, up or down or sideways or what.
It was during the war that RCA invented the image orthicon. In fact, a relatively miniature one, maybe an inch in diameter and 8 inches long or something like that, specifically for a TV guided glide bomb.
Yes.
When I was much younger and I was around Norman's iconoscope camera, what was happening back there, we were looking for an answer to the Japanese kamikazes, and we thought this would be a good idea. Now, RCA designed and built that camera, and what was happening, when they were building aircraft, they could build airplanes back during World War II faster than they could ever do it today. But the engines in those aircrafts were only designed for less than 1,000 hours of use and all of that. That when they reached pretty close to that, they were kind of junked aircraft. So they thought, what can we do with these things? So they were loading them up with explosives and trying to develop that camera. And incidentally, as a byproduct of it, John F. Kennedy's brother was killed in one of those aircraft. He was the pilot that they would take off and fly the thing and get it close to the target, and then they'd bail out. Well, that aircraft exploded before he could get out, and it killed JFK's older brother. And that's fact. And RCA was developing a lot of stuff during World War II at the government's expense. They in the background, they were sneaking around a little bit using funding. And so they really weren't left out in the dark on that. But man, they built a bunch of those cameras, and
Right.
that's the
That-
history behind them.
That particular camera is the one that was used in those planes. They first tried it in a glide bomber, and that wasn't very successful. And then they used the approach that Julian just described, and it was more successful.
The reason I asked about this camera, there was an auction in New Jersey a couple of weeks back. They had one of the cameras, and it also had what looked like the right monitor and power supply for it. I didn't get to the auction. Unfortunately, I had a dental disaster going on. As the auction was going on, they were grinding the top of a tooth off on me, so I didn't get over there. But I did see the picture beforehand, and I was wondering if the equipment you have there is the right monitor or a power supply for this.
That is the correct
camera.
monitor for that. They are very hard to find. I
Yeah.
have a transmitter for the thing. That's all I've been able to find in the last 50 years. But everything that he has right there is the right stuff for it. And I believe he had the antenna for it too. Aircraft had like a little bulge in the bottom for an antenna. And even had that there, I think.
The one that was at the auction had a bigger monitor, sort of the size of the radar tube you have above it. So I was, and it was kind of a greenish color, and it looked like it was set for a big rack mount. But
No,
I have
the
no way of knowing if that was the right one.
No, that's not the right one. The right one is that one you're sitting on the table. You know, that small screen on it. That's
Okay.
the only. I've got a book somewhere that shows the setup on that. If I can find it, but everything that Steve has there is accurate. That's all the correct. That one on the top there is like a Dumont tube, hand built. The big screen. They never had anything that big because they were sighting it from another aircraft that was flying alongside of it. And so they can't have, great big, huge things in the aircraft.
Is there a camera there? I don't see a camera.
Go to Larry. Go to your left.
Yeah, go to the left there a little bit, Larry. There it is. That's the camera right there with that color monitor on top of it. That is a correct thing. And on the front of it, it should have all the data plates on it, which it does. And you can see there it is right there. It's rare to find those data plates on them too. They usually took that stuff off. I remember Norman took his and he made a little a lens cap thing and used something off of an old Kodak Kodachrome camera for a lens that worked actually quite well on that. But his worked good though, but everything he has there, that's 100% right there.
You don't have an extra lens, do you?
No.
I might have one. I had one. It was a parts camera. I've got several iconoscopes for them, and they turn up occasionally. And I made a mistake of selling one of those cameras that was stripped out with no tube in it to a guy one time. I'd buy it back for the $25 that I sold it to him for. That was a mistake. But I've got about a half a dozen of these cameras. The cameras are easier to find than the rest of the peripherals around it.
Yeah, that's what I'm glad I didn't miss if it wasn't the right stuff because.
And you let a dental cap stand in your way of buying.
No, not a
something
cap.
like that
It was an
that's
infection that
unobtainable.
they were grinding the tooth down so they could extract it 2 days later.
I would have said, "Excuse me, sir, I have an important assignment here."
Yeah. No, I would have loved to, but I did manage to absentee bid the guy up to $1,000, and he still went ahead with it. So it must have been worth it to him.
Well, we've got one of the cameras, but we don't have the lens, so it looks better with the lens on it, even if it's the wrong one. You might have to make something.
Yeah.
I've got the transmitter. There's another part there that I think is missing, but I've got the transmitter for that assembly right there. I have to dig it up there. I found it when I was up at Kutztown. But that monitor right there, I think that's the only one I've ever seen that's accurate. I may have seen two of them, but you just don't find those things. I don't know whatever happened to them because they probably sold them separately back then and scrapped them.
How did the museum get that set?
I don't honestly remember. It was a long time ago. We got it in pieces. I know we got the camera first, and then I think somebody donated the transmitter and monitor later. because we've had that camera probably 15 years.
Steve, you had a guy that set up a display up there and had the complete thing there working in your
That's
museum.
Maurice Schechter. He is the expert on RCA military cameras. There were a whole series of them. This was the first one, and there were a number of different types of cameras made by RCA during the war. And he was at the convention one year and brought his display and had his working camera.
I thought that
put
was
a link in the
that he-
chat on one of Maurice's presentations.
I thought that was the camera he brought there. He may have donated, but he had the complete
No,
ensemble.
we had it before.
Now that lens on the front of that thing is a little different. I'm not sure how many different lenses that they had,
Yeah.
but the original lens that came on those had a little, like a little hairline wire that went through it as to defog it. You know, if it got foggy or anything. And usually when you got those cameras, it had the two wires coming out of the lens for that, and people would just take it off, and that's also hard to find. But I think I've got one of those somewhere.
Right. When I was in high school, I lived in Korea in 10th and 11th grades, and which is in the 50s. And after school, I volunteered at with a physics professor at a university. The university is located right next to the high school I went to. And he was interested. He had started the first FM radio station in Korea after the war, using surplus military equipment. And he was interested in starting the first television station. So I helped him. We found one of these cameras on the black market in Korea, built a tripod for it, built a crude CCU for it, and put it on the air, and also built a transmitter. Didn't use that particular transmitter, but built a 50-watt transmitter. I think it was on channel 3, and went on the air with the first television station after the Korean War. Any other comments or questions, or we could move on to talking about anything?
Yeah, I have a comment about the light sensitivity. The iconoscope was touted as an improvement in sensitivity over the image dissector because it's a storage tube. But it threw away a lot of that sensitivity because it used a high voltage scanning beam that caused a lot of secondary emission. And so the image was really, the signal was really coming from was coming from the modulation of the secondary emission current. So it at best got about 10% of the sensitivity that a true storage tube should get. Meanwhile, in England, they added a image section in front of the iconoscope plate and made image iconoscopes, which were more sensitive. But RCA stayed away from that because the image section was covered by Farnsworth patents, and they obviously were not going to touch anything of Farnsworth until they beat his patent to death.
Yeah, part of the reason that Europe got around that was because of Diekman and Hell's earlier image dissector that was like a couple of years before Farnsworth, although they didn't get it working. but it didn't have the multiplier at that point. So I think they were just making that up.
When I was in the Army active duty at Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, I'd hang out at Meyer Hall up there in the studio up there, and I'd help with some of their presentations up there. But one day I walked in there, there was one of those old World War II iconoscope cameras sitting in the studio up there, and I knew exactly what it was. This is going back like 52 years ago now. And I said, whose is this? The guy said, it's mine. He says, the captain wants me to get it out of here. And I said, he had bought it from a surplus store, which is right across the street from the main gates at Fort Monmouth. Anyway, I bought it for $10 and I still have it today. Every time I look at that thing, I just think about old times, but it's a fascinating camera. Also, I have a TK, what is it? A TK20. It's an iconoscope film chain camera. Steve's got one up there in his museum. But all of those iconoscope cameras, not the World War II version, that small Ike tube, but they had a little, like a number 44 lamp in the back of it that light up in the back, I guess to balance something on that mosaic plate. But anybody comment on that, about that, why they put a light bulb in the back of an Ike tube there in a film chain camera or any of the other Ike cameras?
Be light bias.
That's called a bias light.
It's called a bias light to put a little bit of gray on the screen. So that's where you get black level at 7.5. It's just because of that lamp, it allows the mosaic, it allows the tube to rise quicker instead of, brightness, instead of from a dead stop at 0.
Yeah, the quick rise is important with tubes like Saticons and Vidicons, but in the case of the iconoscope, I think it was more to reduce the effects of shading from the secondary emission changing with subject content.
In my collection of in my collection of tubes, I've got a prototype iconoscope tube that came out of the Henry Ford Museum or somewhere, and I got it from Dave Johnson a long time ago. But it's an iconoscope tube, but instead of it having a huge, bulbous end on it, but it's very small, like the size of a flashlight. And I often wondered, when they were experimenting with it, it's dated on it like 1940 and stuff there that came out of there. All the documentation is with it. And it's a lot of interest. How did they figure out by a little bit of light getting in there would balance out the black in the thing there? Was there a hole in the back of the camera that they said, hey, this thing works, kind of interesting.
I was going to show this later, but here you can see sort of a Sony, a 1984 Sony DXC M3 Saticon camera I picked up, and it's working. And this thing has a bias light in it for the 3 Saticons. It lays in the middle of in the prism. And there's a factory adjustment for it too.
Can they adjust the brightness of the bulb itself, or
enough to get that image up to that, 7.5 IRE units above 0?
I have to butt in here. The bias light had nothing to do with the 7.5 IRE.
Well, it's a start. With a camera that does not have a bias light, the 7.5 IRE was still inserted electrically. With the bias light, the blacks were still brought down to black, and that black was set to 7.5 IRE electrically in the control unit. So the bias light is strictly to reduce the lag and the smear in the shadows. And once you had transistorized equipment, it was stable enough that you could change that bias light to whatever worked
best and take it out electronically.
When I lived in Seattle, I'd walk by any one of the 3 network transmitters up on Queen Anne Hill up there. Channel 5 threw out 36 iconoscope tubes in their original boxes up there. And I went and got my wagon. I carted each and every one of them home. I wish I had them all today, but I gave them to Norman Alquist, which gave them to a university television station. But I remember showing one of those tubes at a guy there at Channel 4 at Como. He says, you know, you can take one of those things, you throw it off a cliff, and when they hit and explode, he said they sound like a bomb going off. I'll never forget that either. I never witnessed that, but anyway, he thought it was kind of funny that I didn't do stuff like that. Even when I was 10 years old, I had respect for all of that stuff.
I have a question on some Western chassis I bought off of eBay. If somebody might there have an answer for me. Yes, sir. I got it on the floor here. Whether this is a receiver or camera is the question. The normal receiver, I have one, doesn't have the back chassis on here. It doesn't have this thing coming out for the wheel either. It came from a guy in Indiana, which I think was the home of people with the cameras and stuff at that time. The disc was bent, but here's the disc. I'm sort of trying to straighten it out. That came with it. I looked at the pictures on ETF, and they're all enclosed, the chassis and stuff. So it's hard to tell whether what this really is.
American Television used the same mechanism for its camera and that particular model of receiver, which was their first one, first manufactured receiver after they got out of kits. They had that in American Television after Western Television. So it'd be hard to tell from what you got there.
Yeah. So I know I have a Western receiver. Probably can't see it's back on the floor, but it doesn't have that second piece of chassis on the receiver I have. And all the receivers I've seen on the internet doesn't have that second. So it's either off of 2 receivers or it's a camera. So anyway, that's all I had.
Yeah, I remember Dave Johnson he had so many of those, he was gonna make one of them into a camera, and it wouldn't have been a big conversion, actually, for that particular model, the original Nipkoff aperture disc with the 45 holes.
Yeah, I was thinking this came out of that. There was a doctor in Indiana. I can't remember his name right now.
Ed Taylor.
Dr. Taylor. The guy selling this was selling about 5 Taylor Vision books, and he had also Dr. Taylor's receiver and transmitter, and also sold on eBay at the same time I bought this. So
The Taylor Vision is a good book.
yeah, I have the book. The guy in Florida with the pool table bought the Taylor's receiver and transmitter from that guy in Indiana. Okay, thanks.
That's a wonderful story.
I figure it's good to have spare parts for my Visionette, and if they're just spare parts, nothing else.
Absolutely. Well, it would be nice to get the teaching unit that they used at American Television, which I think it had both. But there are stations that started, very simple stations that started with just their camera, very basic camera.
Yeah. I know on ETF site, there's a third box there too. I'm not sure what it is with the Western wheel on the front, but it's a big tall rack, and it doesn't say on the description what that rack is. So there's a guy on the floor there's a guy with the transmitter, then there's a second guy in front of a big rack with another wheel on it. So who knows, the different pieces they made.
Yeah, they had a lot of models that were either test models or display models, because they did presentations all over the U.S. and Canada for this stuff, and then they sold they sold some of their sets to other companies like Traveler down in Missouri, and that's why the Traveler system is very similar to the Western system. So they got around. They probably have the most common equipment of any of the mechanical television systems.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Speaking of mechanical television and all of that, everybody remember Peter, what was his name? He made those kits with a
Yancer.
Yeah, Yancer. Well, I found one of his receivers. I found the scanning disc receiver, the set itself, but I never got a camera with it or anything. I don't know how they got separated or what. Well, when Peter was still living, I got back in touch with him, and boy, he got all kind of mad at me. He says, "What do you mean you haven't got the camera?" or something like that. I said, "Well, I'm looking for you to build one for me, to replace it." He couldn't understand that. But anyway, I sent him my receiver there, and that's back when he was he was losing it, and his daughter ended up sending it back to me. And I remember hearing him in the background shouting, "Now be sure to insure that thing for $25,000. It's worth it. Make sure you don't lose that thing." But I was hoping he'd build me the camera for it so I could complete the thing. Has anybody ever come across anything or a camera or anything like that? I'd sure like to make a pair of them again.
Here is the original Peter camera. I bought the entire kit. Well, it's not focusing up real well. It's a real, let me try this, whatever. This is the camera. Turn it around. There's Peter's kind of typical installation. And it works. It still works. It's kind of high contrast. You're not going to see faces. You're going to see a black letter A, which was his test card. The thing works.
Can you hold that thing back a little bit? Can you hold it? It's all out of focus. I'd like to see that.
I know.
It's still not working right there, but
yeah.
I'd like to see the inside of it.
Hang on. Let me play with something here and see if I can fix this. Blur my background there and there.
There you go.
Much better.
Yeah.
Let's turn it around there. See the inside, the back of it there.
Let's turn it around.
There's another receiver here.
There's Peter's.
Yeah.
That was a sealed image pickup down there, the photo tube, and just there's the RCA connection. There's the motor.
You want to sell it?
There's his little amplifier box or pickup box,
right?
Which is very, very riveted shut and sealed. You'd have to drill it open to find out what's inside there. And his schematics never included what was inside there.
Did Peter build that little box?
No, Peter never sold. Well, I bought it as a kit. It was a 2-part kit, the camera, and the receiver is over there. I'll bring that over if you want to see it. But it's this little mystery Peter Yancer circuit box. I have no clue what's in there. Here's his pickup photocell inside here, and you actually had to glue aluminum foil around it as a shield. Here, it's an RCA connector right there. That's it. It's the simplest thing you ever saw in your life, but it works. I probably bought this, I'm going to guess 20 years ago from him, when Peter was still, kind of solid, shall we say. Hang on a sec. I'll go get the receiver if you want to see it. All right.
Yeah. Here's another Peter's cameras here that I built. I also bought from Peter 2 12-inch aluminum disc, and also the motors and LEDs that equipment. So I have a complete set I never put together of a 12-inch system. This is an 8-inch Mylar here.
Is that a 24 line system?
Yeah, 24 line.
Yeah, that's what I remember. I couldn't afford those things, so I had to come up with my own system, but it took a long time, but it works.
Any of you guys know if anybody has one of those cameras for sale or by itself or anything?
I'm real curious how many of these kits. I remember when I bought the kit, it was quite pricey. I believe I paid $800 or so for the 2 kits.
That's about right.
You had to assemble the wooden box by yourself. You know, most of the instructions were how to assemble the wooden cabinet, how to glue it, how to clamp it. Because the electronics were all pre-assembled. You just kind of drop them in to his, a base plate, and it was done. There's a disc, there's the motor, it's done. Here's the receiver, which is very, very stylish, for a kit. And
that's the same thing I've got.
Yep. This one, is the original construction with, my staining and painting, and, Peter included all these little, spiral trim pieces on the side.
So dental molding.
Yep. My camera box was damaged by water, so that's lost its original staining. I repainted it kind of into that RCA umber gray for now, but it works. But if you look at the back, see if I can tip this up and get it real close, you can see Peter's little secret box right here. Which
who built that little box?
Peter built them.
Peter assembled that box and designed it himself, and
Yep.
didn't want anybody to see inside of it.
It's riveted. It's riveted shut. I have no clue what's in there.
I think the schematics are on the instruction manual.
Not the electronics.
Well,
Nope.
I think the manual I got, I think they were.
If you got it,
At least a block diagram.
if you got it, please post it somewhere.
I sent
and
both the camera and the receiver to Steve's site. So they should be out there.
Here's the RCA in, which is just, a little audio signal coming out of that photocell. It's a modem signal, basically, up and down.
When I use mine for display, the only thing I can do is turn it on. You can see it flicker. You can see the lines in it, sort of, and it gives them the idea. But I sure would like to have a camera for that thing. Now, that box that's in there that Peter built, is that the same? I mean, did both the camera and that receiver use the same box, or were they different for their application?
I don't know how one obviously had to be a transmit, the other has to be a receive. But it's marked on top, TEC, a television Tesla Electronics Corp, Visionet television video amplifier down there, right there. That's a little paper sticker he put on this thing, but it's riveted shut. You'd have to drill this thing out to open it.
I'd certainly be drilling it out to see what's inside myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what they invented drills for.
You could probably get close from his book that he wrote, because he has schematics in there with the TMT and an FET pre-amplifier at one stage, and then going into like a TLO 82 Fed amp or something like that, a couple of stages of that, and then the drive to the LED. That's what I remember.
You can see the LED assembly up here. Actually, I could probably pull it out, but I'm not going to. I'm going to leave well enough alone. It works.
No question.
Like I said, it does not make a broadcast. You couldn't see yourself. You'd just be a big white blob. It's not very grayscale sensitive. It's kind of on or off. That's about it.
No question about it. Peter was a he was a genius in what he did. But most geniuses that I know of, they're a little bit nutty, and he had acted a little bit nutty around me. And he was mad that I didn't get the camera, like mad at me. And I said, well, it's not my fault. That's what I'm coming to you for. Can you make one? And he said he would, but he went down fast after that. 2 or 3 weeks later, his daughter was sending it back to me.
Yeah, it's
I
no,
will bet.
you know, it's got two controls on the front. One is just basically a speed control, and the other is brightness. And you bump the speed control to kind of get it to sync up. You just turn it, click it off and back on, off on, off on. And then it syncs. That's it.
I wouldn't be surprised if that little box is nothing more than an audio amplifier, frankly, with a lot of gain to it.
I think, Chuck, you're absolutely right.
I'd have my electric grill out. Sorry, you know.
It's very, very high impedance on the input for that pickup off of the PMT.
Sure, but an FET on the front end and then some couple op amps or something, you'd be done probably.
Right.
No, mine's been sitting around. It was sitting 10 years. I hadn't touched it. I finally powered it up, went back and looked at it. And the only thing Peter in his instructions included his test chart, which is a large block letter A on a white paper. That was it. And I got it to work. You know, I could see the thing. And I believe I actually pointed it at a clock of some sort to, you know, see the time. And yeah, in a blob, it was there. But the other thing was, it's backwards. You know, 11:20 in the morning is now, you know, 1:40 in the afternoon.
He forgot to put that switch on the back of it that said forward and reverse.
No, and you know, Julian, you're the only one I've ever heard that has at least one piece of this thing. I don't know how many of these things he sold. I've never, ever heard of another complete kit anywhere.
Well, they were very pricey back then, but did he mine's in the other room. I haven't looked at it in a while, but is yours serialized by any chance, or does it that label?
I have to look. Never thought about that. I got his home phone number. Does that help? No, there's nothing that resembles a serial number here on a receiver.
What's really sad is I talked to his wife one day, and she went over some stuff with me and was telling me, you know, the reports of Peter there, but she passed away there along about the same time he did. But he has a daughter, and I just wonder if his daughter has any idea, or if he kept any records.
I think he had 2 daughters, but I don't know how technical they were.
Well, if you have that phone number, I wonder if any one of them still good, if one inherited the house or anything and got there. I mean, I know they wouldn't have any technical details, but I just wondered if they, you know, being around him, would they know anything approximately how many he did make, or if he was in the loop on it, or if they were on the loop or something.
I'm just going by the marketplace, you know, eBay, Craigslist, the museum, you know.
So there could be just a handful of these things out there, just 2 or 3, 4, maybe, who knows?
I know
he did make a kit, but they were all uniform that I've seen. They're all the same thing.
That's my suspicion, is that there's just a handful of these things.
I just wonder if one of his daughters would look in his stuff if he had any kits that he pre-built ready for shipment, and she still has them and doesn't know what to do with them. I just wonder if that's a possibility. And if you have your instructions how to put them together, it'd be nice if we could replicate that.
I lost mine, but I did find the instructions on the internet somewhere. I have it downloaded, but it's just construction of the kit. That's it. glue this to that, mount the motor.
Richard Dean sent his instructions to ETF. So someplace on their site, you'll probably find his instructions.
I believe that's where I found him.
Yeah, he did it, and I think it was Dave Abramson has one, and
that's me.
Oh, okay. Well, glad to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Glad you're interested in my little toy here.
Yeah, and then there's a guy in Canada who's probably not around anymore. Darcy Brownrigg had one. I used to write him for years.
What's that then? 3?
3, yeah, that I know of. But I never bought one, so I wasn't in the community on that one. It'd be nice if we could find out, if someone's passed, who has passed that had one, if it could be obtained, or if any one of Peter's daughters would check and see if he had any kits ready to go.
Julian, drop me a note, and I've got a phone number here, which is probably long gone, but I don't want to put it out on this form.
Oh, I understand.
Drop me a note. I'll send you the phone number over email, and you can chase down
mine. Mine, I'm sure will have the phone number on it. I've got Peter's. I've got another sheet when he was selling those screw television sets.
Actually, the phone number is only on the receiver module. It's not on the camera.
Yeah, that I do have. But you remember he was also selling those screw television cameras. It looked like a piece of yard art that would spin. Had those glass things that were in kind of a screw, and they actually worked
a vertical spiral.
Yes, and they actually worked pretty good for what they were.
Oh, Peter Yancer was an absolute genius.
He was.
And an expert that we'll never see again on this technology, hands down. And I'm just thrilled I got to know the guy, when it was still kind of normal and, selling these kits. And, I'm pretty sure I paid $800 for this kit. And that was probably 25 years ago.
Do you remember a guy that came from, was it Australia? Had a real weird name, kind of I forget his name, but he had that Telehor, that scanning disc television receiver, and he had one that was working, and he brought it to the ETF for a display there and demonstrated it. And anyway, I was talking to Peter Yancer's wife, and they went to, might be Australia, it was somewhere over there, down under or whatever, and they went over there, and that guy passed away, and she told me the whole story, and I can't remember all of it there, but they went overseas to go visit the guy there. And the guy was out walking, for his morning exercise, and he tripped and fell, and he died. And I'm trying to remember.
That happens.
But I've got a Telehor, and I was hoping that he could make me a cabinet or something, or give me some direction. That he had a real nicely made cabinet there that I would have really willing to, to pay him to make one just like what he did, but I never got that opportunity. Just lost everybody. Yeah, well, I think we're back. Huh. Does yours have two apertures? One for the signals that were side scanned from England, and the ones from Germany that were horizontally scanned at the top? Yes, I have. It came with several discs, one with the English and one with a German standard there. I have both discs for it. That's wonderful. Yeah, Mahaley was a genius, and he was in television for years and years, and everybody hears the stories about Baird, but hardly anybody knows about him. But mine, I still have the lens and the original tube. I have everything. It was meant to be mounted in a cabinet, but I never got a cabinet with it. But it did come with several discs on it. The pictures I've seen of the cabinets are beautiful. Well, the one that guy from Australia, I had a real weird name. It was almost Assman. His name was Assman, Assman, I think. Does anybody remember him?
I remember the name, and I know he had a website. He was.
I thought he was from Belgium, not Australia. Is that he's from Australia?
I think you're right.
It was somewhere from out there somewhere. And Peter Yancer and all of them went to go visit him, and it turned out to be a disaster of some description. But his wife told me all about it. But anyway, before I could get any more information out of Assman there, he passed away.
Yeah, he came to ETF one year and brought his Baird repro set, and it looked like a original.
Yes, he did. He did an excellent job, and that's what I was trying to get into. And also, there was another guy that brought a colored, a color wheel. He was using like a 14-inch black and white Sony monitor. And I tell you what, the one he demonstrated there at the ETF there, you'd swear it had a color CRT in it. It was that good. And I tried to get in touch with him to see if he'd sell it or something. Said he'd been using it for parts, and I was begging him if he could build it up, I'd like to buy it, but I never got anywhere with that either.
That was a screw type mirror system, not a disc.
No, his was the disc, but they did have, Peter did bring the screw disc and all that. That was there too.
Yep. Okay.
But there was a guy that brought a big blonde cabinet there. You know, it's a good size there in the upper left-hand corner. It had like that little 12-inch or a 14-inch black and white monitor in it. And it was quiet of all the crazy things. But I mean, when I looked at that, you'd have to look at it and you'd swear that it was a real color CRT in it. It was that good. But he said he was using it for parts, and I never got beyond that. I can't remember his name either, but he used to come to the ETF.
Cliff Benham?
Could have been.
I wrote him for years about his experiments with field sequential color television. And a side story was I was writing him, and at the same time I was writing the guy at NASA at Westinghouse. And I think I connected the two of them together because he came up and shook Cliff's hand at the ETF meeting one day.
Dennis Assman, I think, was that guy's name. I think it was Dennis Assman, if I can remember correctly.
Yeah, I think he was from Belgium.
Or somewhere like that. He was from, somewhere of Europe.
Very, very talented electromechanical guy. Very talented.
Yes. And the guy that brought that one up to the ETF for the, for the color wheel and all of that was a nice touch too. And all of a sudden the stuff is just disappearing. We can't seem to get any more information from these guys. They're either dead or something.
Well, Cliff died. Cliff died this year.
Oh, the guy that had that color wheel, he died?
He did all the color wheel, all the color tail stuff, all the CBS stuff, and several other brands too. And then he was combining them. We talked for years about that, and back and forth on email. I never met him in person.
But he's gone?
He's gone, yeah. They announced it in the April meeting.
Cliff passed away earlier this year, and he lived, 20 miles from me, and I'll just miss the guy completely. He was so helpful.
Yeah, he was very helpful.
Yeah, in my collection, I've got a complete color tail, and I finally found the amplifier for it, the works for it, and its original shelf. And I was just goofing around on Facebook I think it was Facebook, and I said, does anybody have any electronics for a color tail? And I wasn't expecting anything. And some guy out in California says, I've got one there, and that's all I have. And he said, I've had it for years, and I think I'll sell it, and I sent him the money, and I got it. And I was very fortunate to have found the complete thing there for it. So that ended well on that, but I still need to make a cable for it, which is no big deal. Little 8-pin octal socket there, but
and
we're losing.
Daryl Hawk used to sell his little converter box strictly NTSC in to color till out, and it eliminates most of the connections from that box you have. The only thing you need out of that, I believe, is vertical sync. That box still needs to be connected, just for vertical sync, but the Daryl's little converter does everything else. And
I may have that box. At the ETF auction one time, they auctioned off something. I had to pay over $200 for it, and it became lost. And I said, "Oh my gosh, I've already paid for it, and I can't find it." And it turned out some couple there that was there. It was sitting on top of something that they bought, and they thought that it went with it. Boy, did I catch that in time. Almost, and Steve said, "No," he says he's not responsible for that. And I almost lost $220, I think. I've still got that somewhere, and I need to find it. I think it was the standard for the 405 or something there. I forgot what it is. Now that I'm thinking about it, I need to dig that up and find out what I really do have.
Yeah, because I don't think I don't think Daryl's making them anymore. So hang on to it.
But it would work with that Bush television that I've got, that 405 scan rate, and I haven't even got that thing working yet. I'm just so behind in a lot of stuff right now. Do you want to sell your Peter Answer camera, by the way?
In a word, no. I just found, I did this test last fall. All I've got it here is on the phone. I'm not going to try and, I'm going to just hold it up. Here is, let me see if we can, now that's not going well at all with the brightness. It's, hang on. That is the image I managed to make. That was it.
Well, it still gives people a general idea of what it was all about.
Yep. And I got a problem with the cam. Well, you can't see that. I got a problem with the camera where the disc is scraping on the little mask for the pickup.
It's kind of warped.
Yeah, Peter's plastic is kind of warped over the years and it's scraping. I managed to fix a bit of it by tilting. I unloosened the motor and tilted it, put a couple of washers in to move the disc away from that. But I got to go in there and, take that whole thing out and try and rebuild it. I bought some plastic. It's over there somewhere to do it. It's right after I mow the lawn tomorrow.
If it's plastic, could you just take it out as a disc and then kind of lay it on a flat surface and apply a little heat to it?
I'd be afraid of it warping, and actually it's picked up some little speckles of some kind of fungus on it. So I'm just going to get rid of the whole thing.
Well, I wouldn't be afraid to take an iron or something like that and kind of go over it with some paper, heavy paper over it. Maybe you'd straighten it up a little bit.
If it wasn't for the speckles and the mold or mildew or whatever's on there, I'd do that. But no, not this time. But I thought I was going to show off my little tube camera I picked up for $100 that works, and I ended up like 70 years back showing something else.
In my building, I've got a pallet load of 15-inch Sony color monitors, rack mount. I've got about 15 or 20 of them. And some guy was mentioning to me he'd like to have, looking for a Sony. And anyway, I said, well, I've got a bunch of them. You can come pick one out. He came by and I sold him that in a Sony Profile. And then he called me back a few weeks later and said, I want to buy all of them. And I go, something's up here. Well, I found out why. I looked on eBay and they're bringing like $300 or $400. And I sold him one for $150. That's why. So I'm just going to hang on to them because apparently they're a hot item right now.
4x3 stuff is coming back. I'm not sure who's using it, but
the gamers the game people that operate gaming stuff and all of that, they're into
Yeah.
that stuff, and that's
Yeah,
where it's going.
They'd rather have a 13-inch Samsung portable. I don't know why they would want to buy a rack mount monitor for a gaming setup.
Well, it's a little box, but it's mounted in a little rack mount. You can take it off either way. But yeah, those 13-inch Samsung, those are worth a little money now too. So when I do estate sales, I always find a Samsung. In fact, I bought one today. I bought a Sansui that had a VCR in it, of all things, for $10. Looks like it's brand new. So I'm hanging on to that stuff because it's making another comeback, I think. They did have excellent color.
Would anyone like to see my little camera I picked up here and hear a little history?
Yes.
Well, let me lean over and get this little beast.
Oh yeah, that. I have one of those.
It's a Sony DXC M3. It's the last of their industrial, not broadcast, but industrial tube lineup, 1984. I bought this for $100 off of eBay. I have the power supply from some of my old stuff. This was the first camera I bought when I went into the video production business about that same time. Satacom's. It needs some light. It needs a lot of light. It's not a Plumicon camera. It actually makes a pretty decent picture for 480. It's the color rendition is quite good. And just let all you TV collectors know, I also happen to collect cameras, early home video cameras and a broadcast camera or two. But this one, the guy on eBay said, well, it's got stripes running through the picture. All right, I'll take a chance, $100. I think I paid like $4,000 for it back then in its original day. Sure enough, it arrives. I plug it in my power supply, with the cable that came with it. Yep, it's got stripes. All these kind of jaggedy, but diagonal stripes, but they were floating.
The color oscillator had dropped out of it.
Nope. Incorrect. I opened the camera, I pulled all the boards out, cleaned them, and I was sitting there at my bench turning it, There's stripes. I turn it back. Oops, no stripes. They're gone. Like, what's going on? The 14-pin cable that carries everything from the camera to the power supply and video out had a bad shield in it. It was breaking when you turned it.
I'll be darned.
I found a spare. It was picking up, computer power supplies and LED lights. It was picking up everything. And that floating thing told me, wait a minute, this is not in the camera. This is something outside. Shielding was bad. I found an old spare I had from laying around years ago. Flip that on here. It's great. The picture's good. It's 1984 again, and I'm just having a ton of fun. I've got a viewfinder for it somewhere. I have the complete studio zoom and focus kit for it, courtesy of the Phillies. Thank you very much. They'll never miss it. So I'm just slowly putting this little thing back together, and I'm having a ton of fun with it.
Here in Knoxville, Tennessee, you've heard of HGTV and all of that. That all originated here in Knoxville by a man by the name of Ross Bagwell. Ross Bagwell was a producer of Howdy Doody way back when, and he worked in New York and stuff. But he and his son, they worked for Nickelodeon and produced TV shows. Years ago, when he was doing advertising and stuff, he had to have a camera. And what he did, he went out and bought a Hitachi, a little kind of a little cheap looking Hitachi camera to do stuff. Now this is back in probably the late 70s, early 80s. And what he did, he went and took it to a body shop and painted it white. And he called it something. The name escapes me, but we'll just say XL100, just for a name. Well, anyway, people were real camera conscious back then. And some people who were prospective, advertisers. Well, what kind of a camera have you got? Oh, I've got an XL100, blah, 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 blah. And one of the guys would say, yeah, I've heard about those things. He said he made more money with that camera. But if you told him he had a Hitachi or something like that. But if you ever want to hear an interesting story, you can go to YouTube and type in Ross Bagwell. He's giving a talk to a college. It's not only funny, you have to hear him talk. But he has, and he still comes, he's 93, 94 years old now, and he still goes to his office. Now, his daughter is her name is Dee Haslam now. If ever heard of the Haslams, they own Pilot Oil Corporation. But anyway, she married very well. But he still has his office in the back. And he had a big showcase in the back. And he had all these mementos where he knew Gene Autry. And in fact, he lived next door to Gene Autry when he's down at his summer home and all of that. But in his cabinet, among other things, he had two of the cutest little marionettes you'd ever seen. And those marionettes were made by the same puppeteer that made Howdy Doody. And he said in 1955, he paid $20,000 a piece for those. And that was a lot. He must have been making some big bucks there in the New York scene back then. But he still has them. I've got pictures. If I ever get your address there, I can send you some pictures of these things. But what a fascinating guy to talk to. And when I was up at Kutztown, Pennsylvania, Bruce Mager showed up from New York, and he had some TV guides from like 1948 to 1951. And he had some with Howdy Doody on them on the front. And I bought every one of them. They were in a little shadow box, nicely framed. And I couldn't wait to take them and show them to Ross Bagwell. And I've got pictures of me with him looking at Howdy Doody. And, just little things like that. But that camera story, and these people act like, yeah, I've heard about those things. And they'd hire him to do their advertising for him. What a brilliant guy he was, But look up Ross Bagwell on YouTube if you want to hear an interesting talk. He'll tell you all kinds of neat things.
After I bought that camera, I had to upgrade to an early Betacam, a Sony BVP 30 and a BVV1, record only back. What I did was on the outboard side, I took the Sony little plastic thing and I popped it off. And I took an old RCA metal script logo from the front of an old, eight something TV set, that little metal script, cut the little beads off of the back, and I glued it in place, and I had a RCA Victor Betacam. And I'd take it out, with all the other photogs, and they're looking at this thing. I kept it all polished up. He said, "What's that?" I said, "Yeah, RCA made a few of these. They're badged by, they're Sony's, but they're badged RCA." "Oh, hey, that's great." You still have that thing too, but it's got an issue.
Oh, back when I was in high school, I worked for Dan Giddings. He was a big Zenith guy, and only Zenith parts would come in there. He had a Zenith set in there, but I'd sell TV sets, on the newspaper and stuff like that. But I had this Sears, or it was a Hitachi color TV set. They made a 19-inch console, and it said Hitachi on it. So I broke the little Hitachi thing off, because back then, a Japanese thing would kill the sale of it, and it just looked better without it. Well, I had this Hitachi emblem, and I had this little putty-like stuff one time, and I thought, I'm going to play a trick on Dan. And I adhered it to right over the Zenith logo on a Zenith set in there one day. And I thought, oh, he ought to get a big laugh out of this. Boy, when I came in on Monday morning, boy, did I catch hell over that. Someone had walked in there and said, "There's a Hitachi set." Oh, no, we don't have that. Oh, yes, you do. It's, oh man, I caught hell over that big time. He had a, contract marketing for tubes. He'd go to Gray Bar and buy nothing but Zenith tubes, nothing else. One day we were doing a service call on it. He pulled out like a 12 VH7 or something like that. And it was in a Zenith box, and he pulled out and it said Admiral on it. Boy, he hit the ceiling. He went back up there at Gray Bar and gave them hell. I mean, a tube would have been just fine. It would have worked just fine, but he hated RCA, and he hated especially Admiral. It was just nothing but Zenith. Just peculiar how some people can be. But I still remember sticking that Hitachi label, and it looked perfect too. But boy, did I catch hell over that one.
Well, maybe, next ETF, I may have to box up this Peter Yancer kid and ship it off to Steve's and show it there as a display.
I'd like to see that.
Stir up the waters and see if there's another one around somewhere.
That would be nice. That'd be interesting. I just wonder if any of his daughters have any of his records. Did he keep any records, of who he sold them to? That's another story,
Well, there's 3 of us that we know of.
But yeah, they were like $800 or something. That was kind of pricey 25 years ago. And you're right. I'm sure he didn't sell many, but still interesting. Today we'd pay it, but
no, it's more interesting that you bought a kit for a wooden box and how to assemble that. Everything else was proprietary and in a box, and the disc, it's wonderfully machined or laser cut or however he did it. But it's a little fractional horse motor on there somewhere. That's it.
And Peter also ran a experimental television society, and he had a newsletter that came out quarterly, and there he told you how to build the kits. And he also sold the laser cut 12-inch aluminum disc, which I bought 2 of those and 2 motors and the parts to build the things from his newsletters, but I never put it together.
Yeah.
So I have all those newsletters somewhere, but who knows where they're at.
This is not a 12-inch disc. This is maybe 10-inch at the most. I forget how many lines it is, but it works.
It's still fun. I can turn mine on every now and then. You can see the little red neon thing in there. You can see the scan lines in it. And I said, that's basically how it works. That's usually, someone, if you explain how it works, that's enough, but it would be nice if I had something to put an image on it. I'm just wondering, that little RCA jack on the receiver, what could I feed it, or something? Could I send it?
I'm trying to remember the name of the outfit in Britain that sells a little
narrowband TV
televisor.
Yeah.
Go ahead. You may know it.
It's a narrowband NBTV.
Narrowband Television Association.
NBTV is part of it, but it's a museum that sells a kit.
That's a muter kit. Muter.
Yeah.
MUTR.
Is it done with an audio signal, or what is it done with?
It's a straight out audio signal. Straight out audio signal.
But
they sell this little plastic reproduction televisor. It's a little miniature televisor. It's about this wide, this high. It's just a plastic faceplate, and then a back that holds a solid state image device. But what you plug into it is from NBTV. It's an audio signal. There's test signals on there. I think there's some moving images. It's on a CD, and you play it out of CD player line out to audio in, and this thing works.
It
The
would
mu-
be, it's
the Muter
compatible with,
I'm sorry, the Muter kit also has a microcontroller inside it that has images on it, very simple images, stills. But it's a 32 line. It won't work with a 24 line, of course. So it's not compatible with the Enter stuff.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I wasn't sure of the comparison on lines.
Yeah, I have the Muter kit. I don't know if they still sell that. They might not.
It shows up. The last I looked about 6 months ago, they were out of stock, but it still does appear there.
Yeah, I have a little story about it on my website on hawstv.com. It talks about the Muter kit, and it shows some pictures of it when I unpacked it several years ago. But there are problems with that one. It also has a plastic disc, and it's a floppy disk. The scanning disk is floppy, and it's capable of warping, which is what happened to mine. So I had to build a shield so that the sync LEDs didn't get video in them and screw up the sync.
Yeah, I've had 2 or 3 of them. My problem was the plastic kept breaking all over the place, so I couldn't stand it up, you couldn't glue the plastic back together. The thing's very fragile, but when it works, it does show it comes with like a test card built into it.
Yeah, that's on the microcontroller.
Yeah. And then they send you the NBTV disc, which will play on this thing. Now, like you said, I don't think it'll translate to Peter's thing.
No.
Julian, you might talk to Wayne Bretto. He built a system of his own that he had from, I don't know, was a CD or a computer running both a receiver and a TV monitor at the same time, showing you the receiver and the monitor had the same signal.
No.
At one time, Peter was selling laser machine 32 line discs, and so I bought a couple of those and put together my own receiver and got the CDs from the Narrowband TV Association, and I had that running. And I also hooked the signal from the CDs up to an oscilloscope and used the oscilloscope as a narrowband TV display.
Sure, it worked.
Yeah.
Did you have any Z modulation on the scope?
Yeah, exactly.
That would have been really a nice thing to see.
Yeah. I've got some pictures of what I did. I don't know if the picture of the scope is there, maybe, but on my website, bruttle.com, look for the mechanical TV subjects on the opening page.
Yeah, I think I've been to your website a few times, but I didn't see that part. I'll have to look again. It's a pretty extensive website.
Yeah, it's pretty neglected too.
Well, thanks for the link to my website. Yeah, the Narrowband Television Club is not as strong as it used to be. They're having trouble getting articles, and I don't have time to write for them as much, but they did sell the discs too, and they sell them for cheaper than Peter did. So you could look at their, every time they publish their journal, NBTV, they'll also send you a sales sheet that shows what they have available, and they have laser cut discs. They're very nice, and I think they have plastic and metal at this point.
Yeah, I keep dropping off their list because they don't sent regular notices that your membership is expiring, and I forget about it. So I've missed an awful lot of what they've published.
Lately they don't publish as much as they used to, which is too bad, but that's the way things are.
I have the MBTV discs, and I've also pulled the files off into a folder. Not that I would advocate, passing this stuff around, but get a hold of me and I can send you that file. It's, put it on a little MP3 player, burn your own CD. It'll be the same thing. And also a second thing, Daryl Hawk also used to make a little, converter box that would take NTSC and convert it to multiple line standards, 25, 30, 40, 60, whatever. I believe it was switchable. So that, I don't know that he's making them anymore, but if you can find one or, contact Daryl. I don't have his contact info, but he did make a mechanical converter that would spit out, the audio. It's an audio signal. It would spit it out in whatever line format you need. For you, Julian, one of those might work for you.
Well, that would be it. I'd really like that. I need to look into that. It's
through the ETF, through the ETF, you might be able to get a hold of Daryl and see if he's still got one laying around on a shelf somewhere.
Okay.
There used to be a guy that made software for the NBTV that you could run on your computer. You might be able to hook the computer to it too, and then take that off. If you have the one of the NBTV circuits. They publish books on how to build their circuits.
If nothing else, I'm kind of glad to see that there's, still about 50 people hanging around watching this thing. That's good. Thank you all for being here. The museum is glad to have you.
Yeah, when Steve was talking about raising the entrance fee there and all of that, raising the prices. Anybody remember Don Imus? Don, he was a New York. Up in New York City, he was a big DJ and all that. He did a record one time, like Dr. Billy Saul Hargis, who was supposed to be a preacher, and somebody would yell out, "Well, preacher, what about the wages of sin?" And he'd go, "Raise them, raise the wages of sin." I'll never forget that.
Hello, anybody there? How do I break into you people?
You're talking. Go right ahead.
Yeah, you're talking.
We hear you.
Oh, okay. I'm Doug McDonald. I would just like to bring up a different subject, which is pre-war British. If you look in the back of my picture here, which is sort of dark, you're looking at some sort of, I don't know, daredevil show on my Marconi 702. And I was trying to find out how many of these things, we know how many are on the ETF website, but how many of them actually work? That's the question. What is there a website, or has somebody made a survey of all of these? There's not innumerable, but maybe 40 different kinds of pre-war British sets. How many of those actually work? That's my question.
I happen to own, Doug, I happen to be the owner of a Baird T5. one of 6 known to exist. And I'm getting ready to sell it and repatriate it back to Britain on a separate sale. But the number of those sets that exist probably is still in the 2-digit range somewhere. The number that actually work, yours is the first I've ever seen in the States that works. Most of them are in Britain that work. And there you have to go to the British Vintage Wireless to find out what's going on. It's astoundingly rare that yours is here in the States and working. I'm going to put you in a one-of-a-kind category. I can't, I've been around these things for years. I had a Baird T23 I sold, both of which are missing a module each. So it's up for somebody else to restore, not me, because British electronic construction is just Greek to me. I thought
good answer, Dave.
Yeah,
Pretty good answer.
I thought I could do it, but once they got here and I looked around and I started reading, this is almost like pre-internet. I've had this thing. It's for somebody better than me, and they're all back in Britain or maybe in Europe somewhere. So,
well,
Doug, that is a special set, and if you get a chance on one of these meetings to pull that camera up close to that thing and show us a picture, we would love to see it.
Well, I can't. I don't know. My camera zooms, but I don't know how to zoom. I can zoom it on my own display, but I don't know how to zoom it to send it to you. I can move it a little bit close.
Doug, just pick up the laptop and walk it over there. Well, so much for Doug's Wi-Fi.
It's tethered. It just won't do it. There it is. How can I? That's the best I can do. Oh, wait a second. I can do a little better than that by turning off it's reflecting the screen of you people. But there it is.
No, it's amazing that CRT, which probably a 2.5-volt CRT, is still that good.
Yeah,
hooray for you! That thing working.
I did not restore this set.
Okay, that was my next question.
It came to the U.S. to the person who imported it, restored. The person that owned it before me in the U.S. never tried turning it on. I checked it out and did a bunch of tests and got the proper voltage to it, turned it on, and it worked. So there.
Is that a 220-volt set?
That's correct. No, it's 240.
Or 240.
Yeah, I just
the mains, as they call it.
Yeah, I just put a
transformer.
120. I put a 120 to 120 isolation transformer and just used that to step up the voltage. And it didn't work right, but it worked. And it didn't take very much to make it work right. All the capacitors had been fixed, except it's very interesting, the capacitors. The bypass capacitors are all mica, and they're little packages that there are 4 of them in a package. And all it is a bunch of metal strips with mica between them that are clamped together. There's no insulation except the mica. There's no potting or anything. They're just out there, and they just work.
Sometimes you wonder about British electronics. They drive on the wrong side of the road, and their mains, as they call it, are 240, 220. Why do they want 240 volt when, we're at 120, when we work, just seems like they'd be burning down a lot of houses there, for faulty wiring, something like that.
Well, the British and the Europeans in general are very paranoid about their electrical outlets. They all have fault interrupters in them these days, and et cetera, et cetera.
Well, we more or less do the same thing as well, but still, why couldn't they just use 120 like we do? What's the advantage of going 240?
Well, there's no
twice the voltage, half the amps.
It's just what they started with, and they just kept it.
Well, when you raise the voltage, you increase your amperage there for your breakers and stuff. But still, we're talking, like home use stuff and all of that. Is it really necessary to go 240 with more current?
240 requires half the current of 120.
Okay, right. Yeah, okay. I'm thinking of something different.
But so so you people, I just wondered how many, of these things there are. The ETF definitely has one Murphy set that sort of works. Their Marconi, the 702, used to work, and a couple of others used to work, but presently just the Murphy is the only one that works.
Well, like Dave said there, you've got a 1 in a million shot right there. You're probably the only one that has one working. But if nobody ever imported them, pre-war to bring to this country because they wouldn't work, number one. If they did come in this country, they came over as a collector's item, which would be very minuscule. But I would say he's probably right in the double digits, and they probably didn't make many of them to begin with because Britain didn't have much of a television system, just pre-war. It was all pretty much experimental there in that palace that they had. But I'd say they're just, I doubt if they probably made a couple of hundred of those sets. And who would buy them back then pre-war? Coming out of the Depression and Britain and the British pound against the American dollar and all that. I'm sure very few people could afford something like that back then.
Actually, at the beginning of the war, there were more television sets operational and sold in Britain than there were in the U.S.
I'd say you're
correct.
Right.
Absolutely correct. And the British did something different than we did. The British television and radio was determined by the post office. The BBC was a part of the post office, and the post designed the radios. This is the radio you're going to build with this circuit. That's it. Television was the same. That's how they got ahead of us in radio and television design. They were on the air in 1937 with, whatever the scan line, full electronic scan line system was before we were, because they used a government mandate to build a circuit. This is the circuit. You all go ahead and build whatever you want, any cabinet you want, but this is the circuit you're going to use. Here in the States, everybody's trying to build circuits, grab a patent, sell the patent here, sell the patent there, whatever, to end up with a TV set. We were 2-3 years behind them in design and implementation.
That's not.
That's not true.
I believe that they started in 36, as I recall. They had a contest between the Baird system and the Mercury system. The Baird system was absolutely much worse. So they settled on the Mercury system, and I think it was 36. and they were broadcast.
It was November of 1936.
Okay, and they broadcast until September 1 of 39, and they shut the show off abruptly then until after the war. Our standards, the first television broadcasts, of course, you guys probably know this as much as I do, but the World's Fair was when they started sort of broadcasting, but the standards weren't set till July of 41, and then everything stopped during our war. So we didn't get started. Actually, we didn't get started, I don't think, until after the war, really.
That's not true. The British pre-war British televisions have a very, very wide range of circuitry. There are a lot of things that are very rare to us. The most amazing thing is that a large fraction of them, for quite a while, used horizontal oscillators that were thyrotrons. And there were numerous companies, and they had all sorts of different kinds of circuitry.
Well, you guys have probably seen the pictures. I saw the 405 line pictures in the 60s when I was in England, and it was quite absurd. It was service you could watch. It was good.
Oh yeah, this thing here that's behind me, it's absolutely completely watchable. It's
yeah.
Black and white, but it's just fine.
Yeah.
Well, they used spot wobble on the 405 line sets to get rid of the lines between lines. That was one reason it looked better.
Well, a very few sets did. This one doesn't. It just doesn't have the world's greatest focus.
That was one of the ways they converted between different EBU standards too. They would put one of the sets slightly out of focus, and they could get a conversion from, say, 819 lines in France to 625 lines or 405 lines. Another one was that during World War II, the Brits shut down their television at Alexandra Palace, but they kept on listening for other anomalous signals from the mainland. And one day they came out with a strange signal. They couldn't quite decipher what it was, and they brought in some TV guys to look at it. And they said, "That's television." And they said, "Well, how could it be television? The Germans overwhelmed France and took everything and shut everything down." Well, what they had done is they converted the 455 line French system to the 441 line German system, and they put it on the Eiffel Tower, and they were transmitting to troops that were wounded in Paris. And so the Brits had enough slop in their 405 line set so they could put them in a high spot on the cliffs once they got it away from their radar signals, and they could pick up the Eiffel Tower and find out how much devastation their bombs had wrought in France. So they kept on watching the German signals for surveillance.
There's another story that's very interesting. The British preserved exactly zero moving pictures of their pre-war television system. There exists one and only one video representation. Of course, it's on film, like a kinescope. And that recording of the British television was made by RCA in New Jersey by reception over the Atlantic.
I heard about that. That's amazing, though.
You can see it. It's on the internet.
That's one of the reasons. One of the reasons that they saved the Eiffel Tower was because of radio and television. They were going to tear the Eiffel Tower down, but the government was using it for military communications. And that's the reason the Eiffel Tower still exists today, from what I understand.
Yeah, radio.
There's a BBC film, it's about 12, 14 minutes long, called TV Comes to London, that's still floating around. Now that, again, was a film presentation, but it shows the early days of the BBC television.
With this TV set that I bought came a whole bunch of framed with like glass in front of them advertisements from pre-war Britain, the most interesting of which was an advertisement in a trade journal trying to get shops to sell the televisions. Television is here. It's interesting.
What kind of showrooms do you think they had in Britain back in pre-war, showing TV sets and, equivalency? What would a TV set typically sell for? They were rather expensive in our country. I just wonder how did they market these things?
The price for the Marconis varied between 67 and something like 125 guineas. A guinea is 13/12 of a pound.
Actually,
so how much would that?
A shilling. A guinea is a pound and a shilling. 5% more than a pound.
Well, how much would a TV set like that cost in Britain? I mean, in American money, putting it in our perspective.
I would be surprised it would be just 13 pounds. A pound was $5 then, so that meant it would be costing about 5 times 13, which is what, about $65?
No, they were costing, as I say, between the Marconis, 67 and something like 140 guineas.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, is like 8% more than a pound.
So in a U.S. money, what are we talking about here? Roughly speaking, of course. We talking about $100, $150, $200, or?
Oh no, much higher.
Much right. Multiply it by 5, and that would put you about where it was in U.S. dollars.
And the sets were primarily in high-end department stores like Harrods and such. They were not local corner dealers.
Something I never really thought much about was like British showrooms back pre-war. Where would you go to find these things and such? What kind of program? There was an individual that came to the early television thing and put on a very nice presentation of European television. And I think RCA shipped about 7 of their TV sets over there at one time. And he had one there up on the stage there that was one of those. Which was very interesting.
Would that be Ingo Kube?
I can't remember names to save my life. I can't remember who it was, but he put on a real nice presentation there.
Well, the British were not that far ahead of us in television. They certainly were ahead in commercialization, but the technological difference was small at the time.
Do any of the studio cameras still exist in Britain that were pre-war? I mean, many of them, or any electronics or any studio stuff like that? Do you know of any that still exists in their museums or anything?
I really don't know.
They're probably in the Bradley Science Museum.
They always publish books on everything. It'd be nice if there was a paperback book or something showing the British Museum or early television for Britain, just like we have for our own stuff. It's not hard to find, price guides and all that kind of junk. But it'd be nice to find a British book, that would show a lot of that stuff.
You can find in the old, look for old issues of Andy Emerson's 405 Alive. There are some on the web. He's very involved, or was at one time very involved in restoring old 405 equipment and the history of it. And some of these stories, like the one I told you about France and the Eiffel Tower, came from Andy Emerson.
What year did Britain stop using the 405 system?
Oh, 1985, I think.
Yeah, because I have a 1948 Bush television set, a small screen set in a little Bakelite cabinet. And I think it's 405. And I've got a converter for that if I can find it. I think that's what I've got.
The great TV 22.
believe
Yep.
that's what it is.
What was I going to say? Oh, one thing that's interesting is that that still exists, and I have a PDF file of it, a complete manual. It describes all of the technological stuff that was derived or designed or researched to build their television transmitting infrastructure. They're all the schematics of the entire Alexandra Palace system that first broadcast the 405 lines. It's all there in the book. It's amazing. Everything, the cameras, the control units, high frequency links. Right at the beginning, they had a remote unit that went around and broadcast sports.
I had a Marconi video monitor for a Marconi Mark III camera. I had that thing around for a long time, never could find much about it or anything, and it just didn't fit my genre. And I gave it to Steve up there at the Early Television Foundation. I thought he could have it. So if you see one up there, it came from me. And I didn't know what else to do with it. I do have a Marconi Mark IV camera and no CCU for it, but
those Marconis were on the Ed Sullivan show in black and white in the day. CBS loved them.
so they did build some with the NTSC
Correct.
system.
Correct.
This set I have will show NTSC. You feed it into NTSC at the correct RF frequency, and you just turn the knobs and it works. I should add, of course, it's positive modulation. You have to use positive, not negative modulation.
Is that just a matter of, turning down the horizontal frequency to get it to match?
Yeah, you turn down the horizontal, you turn up the horizontal frequency, turn up the vertical frequency, and invert the video in the converter box. You got to.
It's close enough.
You have to use a converter box because this set is not a superhet. It's a TRF set. But the TRF frequency is essentially the standard frequency post-war American. It's 44 megahertz. TRF.
How convenient.
And it's also a major nightmare to align the thing. Oh my goodness. The instruction manual has several different alignment instructions that you use depending upon your signal strength. It has a small amount of RF gain adjustment, which is the RF gain is adjusted by adjusting the voltage on the screens of the 6 TRF amplifier tubes. Weird.
Were there any other countries developing television, like the British, the US, and Australians probably did something, or well, they were under British rule anyway, but I just wonder, was any other third world country trying to get into television or anything else
I'm writing a chapter on international television in the transition period between medium definition television and high definition television. Italy was developing television technology. They had beautiful sets under Castellani. He was the big inventor there. They had Fernseher and Telefunken in Germany, and they had a lot of research. They had several researchers in France, although they weren't as up to date as some of the German guys. The Germans, by the way, built a huge studio that was connected to the Eiffel Tower. It was much bigger than the British had. They had like 25 cameras versus 6 or 7 for the Alexandra Palace setup. So it startled the British when they went over and saw it after D-Day.
And
Russia
Germany put the Olympics, was in 1936 or 38 Olympics on TV.
1936, and Japan was working on it for 1940 after under Taka Yanagi. Taka Yanagi had been involved in television since the 20s. So, and many of these people had been involved as far back or even farther back than Baird, like Mahaley, for example, in Germany and Hungary, I believe it was. So television goes way back, even electronic television.
Now with Vladimir Zworykin, he was Russian. Where did he kind of fit in this picture here? Where did he kind of get his background, or what was I guess what I'm trying to say is, what was his manner of thinking? Was he thinking about what the other countries were doing, or did he have something all of his own?
He started out as a student of Boris Rosing in Russia before the revolution, and eventually worked his way through France and then back into the United States and perfected some of the ideas of Campbell Swinton, where Campbell Swinton was saying you could use the camera, use a CRT for the camera, not just the brown tube for the CRT. And he proved that out to be true. Rosing had started that research, and pretty much the war and technology and bureaucracy in Russia squelched him and slowed him down, but Zworykin carried it on and went much farther. And then he became an emissary while looking for ways of improving his iconoscope, the original iconoscope that he started inventing in 1923 for Westinghouse, which didn't work very well. He went to Europe and picked up charge storage from Tihany, for example, in Hungary, I believe it was. But he was an emissary to Russia, and then Russians imported RCA technology and reverse engineered it, just like the Germans and the British had. The British actually claimed that they had invented their own camera called the Emitron, which was form, fit, and function-wise pretty much the same as the iconoscope, but it's British pride. And every country has pride, but they also have a lot of intelligent geniuses working in their technology. And the more I look, the more people I find.
I've got something. I'll look at my display case. I've got something I'll show you guys here. Let me go get it.
When there's a chance for me to break in, I'd like to show you guys an example of the image dissector, the iconoscope, and the Nemo tube, if that's okay with you.
Very interested, Richard.
Please.
Well, first is my image dissector. This is a very late ITT tube. I sent it to a company in Washington State and had it CAT scanned. Eventually, I planned to try to make it work. I had it CAT scanned so I could get the pin out. And then there's RCA's last iconoscope that they made, which is the 5527. And I have gotten pictures out of this tube. I have some other later image dissectors that I have managed to get pictures from them that they're recognizable. I do that by taping a slide to the front and shining a light through it. And then my prize in my collection is my Nemo tube, my miniature image orthicon.
Oh yeah, beautiful.
Richard, are those image dissectors the later versions that are used in like boilers and furnace applications?
No, that was an industrial company that did manufacture their own tubes, These are made by IT&T. These are from the final years of Farnsworth. I have
where were they? Where were they used?
Well, I believe all the applications. Well, these were probably used as computer imagers with the early computers, where they would drive the deflection yoke with a DAC and then read the video with an A to D converter at slow scan speeds. They had apparently a 2,000 pixel resolution, and if the unique property of the dissector is the slower you scan it, the more sensitive it is. So
looks like a photo multiplier tube.
Yes, it is. It's an imaging photo multiplier, and the way I describe it is it's literally the ideal imager for all applications except live television. It's just heartbreaking. I cry for Farnsworth at times.
Well, was that tube used in electronic typesetting?
Yes, something like that. Yes.
Here's this prototype iconoscope I've got that came from RCA Labs. Can everybody see a good picture of it or anything? It's got a label on it, and the label on it says, geez, let me get my magnifying glass out of my eyesight. October 31st, 1940, South Vault. It's an L405 something. Just says South Vault JSD and something else I can't read, but October 31st, I believe that's 1940. But you know what can everybody see that okay?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's interesting they still have the target plate at the back of the tube instead of the front. You know, it's just an iconoscope in a different tube.
Yeah, I guess they were experimenting. It'd be nice if I saw his Workins name on it or something, but it's got all kinds of taps all around it for, I guess, voltage and bias and stuff like that. Video output.
Are those all the big 1/4-inch kind of connectors?
No, they're just little nipples on there with a wire sticking out on them.
Right. They
Oh,
have
okay.
caps on.
I don't know. Can you see anything? Look like little nipples there.
Yeah. They haven't soldered the caps on those. I would
Haven't
guess.
gotten any standards then. It's just strictly experiment.
I would guess that they were experimenting with a higher resolution mosaic, perhaps. It's a much smaller imaging section.
The iconoscopes that are used in those military cameras, I have one here, and it works. They have connections like that. The ones in the front don't have like the regular things that you have on the top of transmitting tubes and the things like that. They're just see-throughs. And the iconoscopes are very fragile because they can't anneal them after a certain step of the manufacturing. And people break those, they break the vacuum at those when attaching the wire. So it's like in my set, I decided that it would be safest to get the tiniest alligator clips I could get on a slightly, limp wire and clip onto those things, and which seems to have worked quite well.
There was a tube like that, looks the same, similar shape to that one, that had the target on the top of the top cylinder. And that was, the Italians were using that, and it only could scan one line of the picture. And it got its vertical scan from a mirror drone. Yeah, it was actually smaller than some of the electronic cameras. And then the target was mounted on a gimbal so that you could spread the scanning across. They thought that the photocell would have too much lag, so that you would either move the gimbal or there was some mechanism for doing that. And I haven't found the mechanism, but I've been reading about it.
That gives a new meaning to hybrid.
Yeah, it was pretty fascinating. The other question I have for Richard Deal is, Farnsworth got into using multipliers, and he was going to sell those as an alternative to high gain pentodes. And I was wondering if Richard had any of those multiplier tubes.
I don't have anything like that, but I'm well aware of it. He called it the multipactor, and it was his answer to amplifying the very low gain from his image dissectors.
Yeah, I think there was some reason they failed. I think that was they just didn't last long enough.
Yeah, you can burn them very easily. You'd seldom see an image, an electron multiplier that's more than 10 or 11 stages, because you reach a point, as I read in Farnsworth's book, that where a single electron will enter the front and the last plate will melt.
Oh.
The gain is astronomical on those things.
That's correct.
Yeah. And so you never see more than 10 or 11 dynos.
That's right. And I used a huge number of photomultipliers in my scientific research. I once ordered up a batch of 100 1-inch diameter tubes from Hamamatsu, all a matched 100, to build a television camera with 81 photomultiplier tubes in an array that was scanned sequentially, like with capacitors at the output of each one for a scientific experiment. And it used a mirror lens to image down to, it imaged a region that was a centimeter in diameter, 2 centimeters in diameter. And this thing was f0.7.
Wow.
That's completely ridiculous.
I'm running out of power. I'm going to have to say goodbye for tonight.
Oh.
So, good night.
Good night, James.
But photomultipliers are wonderful things.
Can you tell me something about photomultipliers? When I worked at Motorola on the video player project with CBS Labs, they use a flying spot scanner and a common type of photomultiplier, I think P31, something like that. But we got RCA units and Japanese units, and we found the Japanese photomultipliers to be much less noisy than the RCAs, unless you open the box under fluorescent light and expose them to bright office light. And after that, they look to have the same noise level as the RCAs. So we never made the experiment of putting them back in the box for a while to see if they would recover. But I wonder, is there something about the photocathodes that can be permanently degraded just by exposing it to a high light level without it being powered?
Yes, you can permanently damage them, but not from you damage the sensitivity, but not the dark current. You put them in the dark and let them sit for 2 or 3 weeks, and they'll have returned right back down to their low levels.
Okay, yeah, the thing I can't tell you is what was the situation with the increased noise, if it was because the sensitivity was decreased from what you just said. That's must be what happened. But of course, we didn't do the experiment of what is the gain setting before we expose it and what is the gain setting afterwards. So it would make sense that the sensitivity decreased and we just cranked up the dyno voltage to get the signal level.
No, that's the opposite. The gain is not affected unless you burn them, of course. Unless you put enough light on them to burn off the cesium or the rubidium. No, it's the light level. The photocathode stores up the holes and electron pairs that are produced by the light, and it takes weeks for it to drop back down.
Ah, good to know. That's good to know.
Yeah, okay.
Is anyone familiar with this style of photomultiplier tube? This is a steerable photomultiplier, and it's my best guess, that this is the targeting sensor from a missile, from a heat seeker. That's my best guess. I've been able to get 32 line pictures out of these.
I've seen a tube like that, and the association that pops into my mind is the navigation star sensor for some of the early space capsules.
That's right. That's the other application. They, again, if you scan them slowly, they're very, very sensitive. And so you can get these on eBay every now and then. You have to watch for them. What you will find is this base unit. It's usually in a cryogenic can, and it'll have the tube number on it. So you search for FW, Frank William, actually Farnsworth, 130, and these things will turn up, and they're in the can. No one knows it. And you can snatch these up for $20 or $30. That's how I got 3 or 4 of these. And they have on the label, they tell you the aperture sizes. So currently the one with the smallest aperture that I've got is in my ongoing NBTV camera project. I'm building a 32 line NBTV camera, and I consider this acceptable because the image dissector is contemporary with Baird and his mechanical TV, so they are compatible.
I thought while we're on the subject, you might want to see this. Here's another prototype RCA iconoscope. It's about the same size as a regular one, but you notice the back of it, it's got another neck on the thing. And it's written on the thing, it says take 10 minutes at 225 degrees, whatever that was for, either cooking it. And instead of the usual flashing, and it's using gold, it's gold, not gold flash, but like gold leaf on the inside of it, instead of the usual dag and the getter in it. And anyway, the mosaic plate, it looks real dark colored. It's a little different from a regular one, but can you see what it kind of looks like?
How in the world did the image get past that knob on the front to the mosaic?
Now, that's a darn good question, but I think that's what this snout is about right here. It looks like, I don't know if it was anything that they put video or if it was a light or something.
Yeah.
Or it was something experimental.
More likely a short focus lens of some type right up against
or
that.
It would send electron beam there to the mosaic plate of some description.
It could be a scan converter.
That's a possibility too. But this one, I think it's from the same era, like 1940. And this one, unfortunately, it's got a little, one of these little ears is broken on it. And of course, it's down to air, but kind of sad. But I have seen some of these things, that experimental tubes where the mosaic plate, it had 4 different types of surface on it. And the same thing with a small CRT, they had something with different surfaces in it, or a scanning disc or an early pickup tube. But I just found it unusual. But this was meant to project some kind of an image on the plate. Again, they were experimenting various ways of till they developed what they wanted to. But it's got a nice, it looks like a 4x5 camera slide on the inside of it. You know, like a 4x camera would use. It looks just exactly like something like that, like it's a film. something. I can't
Is
tell.
there
It's
an
really
image
dark.
on it? Is there an image on it?
I've looked, it just looks black to me.
Oh,
I haven't put a bright light on it, but
yeah, that
I
might
don't,
be a lamp that's in the front, and that's actually some sort of monoscope.
it's, I don't know how you put an image on it though.
Well, the image may be on the slide. You can't see it.
Well, I've had it up to bright light before,
Oh,
and I
wait,
see
you said it
something.
went to air. It went to air. So your silver has oxidized. That's what the black is.
No, that's possible. Yeah, that's a good supposition there.
Yeah.
Huh. And the back of it, it's got a cross something like I haven't seen. I don't know. Can you see it?
Yeah, that's a support wire.
It is to support a little X wire in it.
That's right. That looks very much like the same as the support in the 2F21 monoscopes.
But it's just one of these tubes. You don't see this stuff. You know, how many of these are in existence?
Right. Those are all laboratory experimental tubes. They may or may not mean anything. You know, they would make them and bake the targets at different temperatures and different lengths of time. And as I understand it, they vacuum the tube down, then they fill it with hydrogen, and then they bake it, and then they vacuum out the hydrogen, and it converts the chemicals that they put on there and causes it to bead up into droplets and so on. And the apocryphal story that I read in maybe George H. Brown's book, where they had put some tubes in the oven for lunch. They all went out, left the tubes in like 3 hours longer than normal, and when I don't know how true that is, but it's a great story.
No, that is a good idea. Well, they may have had some kind of an image on that plate back there, and this could have been some kind of a lamp.
Correct.
And they were experimenting, you know, to give it light.
Right.
And but still, you know, where would you ever find one of these? This is, you know, the beginning of television right here.
That's correct. Yep. I think I have one Vidicon, experimental Vidicon. So.
Kids, I'm going to sign off and thank you so much for being here on behalf of the museum. I loved showing off my Peter Answer stuff because I didn't know I was going to do that. And we learned a lot. I learned a lot. So anyhow.
Covered a lot of territory tonight.
Hey, Dave.
Exactly.
You were wondering about a signal source for your monitor. If you go to my website, labguysworld.com, and look under the electronics project and look this guy up, it's my NBTV signal generator. And the way I built this, it can be programmed for any mechanical scan rate and images loaded. It's just some canned images in ROM. And I built it on color and monochrome.
Well, that's probably best for Julian, who doesn't have a camera and just has a receiver.
Oh, you have a camera. You have a camera.
I have the whole complete set.
Oh, you have the whole set. Okay. Well, for anyone who has any kind of mechanical TVs, you can check this project out on my website. And it's my typical goofy design stuff, but it's canned pictures in ROMs, in flash memories. And I built the state machine using the same flash memory, so you can reprogram it to any scan rate you feel like.
Well, that might help me, because right now my camera only seems to be able to do a very high contrast test image.
Right. Well,
when I built it years ago, I recall it used to be able to do grayscale. I don't know where that has gone bad.
Right. Well, if you can email me the specs for the 40-line, is it 40-line video? I could try making a set of ROMs for this, and even send it to you on loan to try it out.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect, Richard.
So
this is what's great about this outfit.
Yeah. Does your monitor take composite video with sync pulses and all that?
No, it's strictly, audio data flying
But,
back and
but
forth.
I mean, the signal itself, it's one input jack, right?
Was that?
Your monitor's only one input jack, not two.
Yes, just an RCA. That's it.
Yeah, well, then it probably takes a relatively normal composite style signal, negative sync pulses, positive video. That's what this box makes. So,
We'll find out.
okay, well, drop me a line if you want to, and I'll see what I can do.
We'll talk.
Okay.
All right, kids. I'm signing off. Gotta fade away.
Okay. Good night.
Good night, everybody, and what
Good
a
night,
great
Dave.
night it's been. Thank you on behalf of the museum.
Yeah, my computer is blipping out there. I don't know what, I may have had a loss in signal here in my house, but anyway, I think we covered a lot of territory tonight on iconoscope and early stuff there. And Peter answers stuff. I've been looking for answers with his stuff. So I may try and call that number and see if his daughters answer that number that I may have for it. That'd be nice if they would find some stuff in his archives.
Yeah.
Richard, whereabouts do you live? What town?
I'm in San Jose, California.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I'm right in the middle of the Silicon Valley.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. Oh, boy.
Yeah, my son lived in Emeryville, California. They're right across the San Francisco Bay. Yeah. Unfortunately, my son passed away this last March 22nd, just a few weeks before his 36th birthday. It has turned our family upside down. I always thought I'd have somebody to leave this stuff to, because my daughter would probably back a dumpster up to the front door, and empty the place out. She doesn't have the value. But my son was over there as an engineer in a company that he was partners with, and I don't know. It's just changed my whole outlook on life. What am I doing with stuff now? Because I have nobody really to take care of it now.
Yeah, I appreciate exactly what you're saying. I just sent 3 color cameras to a little boy in Columbus, Ohio. Some Akai 2-tube cameras. He's 11 years old and he's precocious, and they wrote to me. His father wrote to me and could help him with a color camera he was working on, and I saw it as an opportunity to get another cubic foot of my storage locker back.
There's a lady, what's his name down there? Bobby Ellerby sent me. Mm-hmm. She's restoring a TK41 color camera, and I thought that should be my wife right there.
Yeah.
Did you get hit with any of the storms out there that they just recently had?
No, we didn't even. We got just the slightest misty rain at noon on Thursday, and that was it. That was all much farther south from here.
Hmm.
Yeah, and no reasonable earthquakes to report.
How far are you from San Francisco?
About 40 miles south of San Francisco.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, right at the tip of the bay. And
well, I sure like the area my son lived in out there in Emeryville.
It's beautiful up there.
It is really pretty. It was beautiful. Yeah, that's the only good thing that we got when we had to close his apartment up over there this last April.
Well, I'm so sorry to hear that.
But anyway, that's just one of the hazards of living, my uncle would always say.
That's right, the cost of living.
And that too. But it's just one of those things. But I've been involved in radio all my life. I was born in Washington, D.C., and our house there in Arlington, Virginia was less than a mile from the Arlington incinerator, where the garbage trucks would go and dump garbage. But I'd walk over there. It was walking distance, and they had an old black guy there that was in the gate there that he'd weigh the garbage trucks as they came in there, because they'd dump it and they'd burn all the garbage. But they had an area out there by the fence where you dump old refrigerators. I was over there, if not daily, every other day looking for old radios. And I used to go around begging for old radios. And there were some people I knew there that would show me stuff. And if you ever remember the old telephone trucks, it was like a pickup truck, but it had that service body on the back, but it had a flat platform on the back. And when I'd see them in the neighborhood, I'd try and run them down, and I was successful on several occasions. It'd give me wire and old telephone receivers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then my dad was transferred from there to Seattle, Washington, and we lived up on Queen Anne Hill overlooking the World's Fair. That house today is now worth like $4 million. I think my dad paid like $13,000 for it in 1960. So we lived there from 60 to 63, and I'd walk to school, and I could walk by Channel 5 King, Channel 4 Como, or Channel 7 Cairo, and also their radio station, which was across the street from Cairo. And they had an elderly gentleman there named Mr. Updegrove, and he was a real Geppetto-like character, you know, and he liked me, and he'd give me tubes and stuff, and did all this stuff, and I carried like 30-something iconoscopes home one day from Channel 5 that they threw out in the trash. I'd always check their trash out the trash cans. And Cairo, the studio and the transmitter was all on one property up there on Queen Anne Avenue. And I checked their garbage cans, and I'd find film and slides and exciter lamps from the projectors, and that's where I got my first taste of videotape. And then there was Norman Alquist, brilliant guy. His dad worked for Boeing up there, and he was a brilliant guy, and I still keep up with him to this day. And I've got some Como stuff there, but I've got that Channel 4 Como TK41 that I highly treasure. So, you know, I was always in the right place at the right time. And kids today, there's nothing to look at when you go on a transmitter.
No.
When HGTV was here, all you look at were black panels with flashing lights on them. That was it.
You go into
computer.
You go into a TV station today, it's a server farm. It's sad. It's heartbreaking. There's nothing to see. You know, when we were kids, we could take apart a radio or an old TV and get our hands on a ham radio handbook. You could work out what most of it was. Kid pries his iPhone open today. He's lucky if he doesn't get burned by the battery. I mean, there's nothing he can learn from it. Not a thing.
I remember when I was in the second grade there in Arlington, that would have been like 1958, something like that. I'd bring an old radio chassis to school, and the teacher would have me go up in front of the class and explain how a radio works. Don't really know how I did, but I did it, and they liked it. And it had show and tell, and I'd always bring tubes and stuff, and you know, to class and all that. And today, man, they'd put you in jail if you brought stuff to school.
That's right. That's right.
You know,
I
like
carried a 10 BP4 into my 6th grade class with me one morning. The teachers all, what the hell?
I remember my dad had a lot of his World War II. When I lived in Arlington, everybody's father there in Arlington was in the government, or they were in the army or something. I can barely remember when I was just probably 2 years old. We lived in some apartment place there in Arlington, and I was playing in the sandbox. And this gentleman in an army uniform with 4 stars on his epaulette there would pick me up and throw me up in the air. I remember looking down and seeing those stars. But you know, in the Pentagon there, you could throw a rock, and if you don't hit 15 or 25 generals of some description, you're somewhere else, you know. They were everywhere, but everybody there, and I just, you know, and they grew up, and it was a very patriotic back then. And, you know, and I remember the Kennedy-Nixon debates and all of that back in 1960. And I'll tell you what, this whole thing, this Donald Trump thing, I'm getting sick and tired of hearing it. They need to spend this money on something else instead of the Democrats trying to put them in jail, you know, all the time. And they're not getting anywhere. All we're hearing is just bad stuff. And I don't even know what to believe anymore. They've just distorted it to the point where we're done for.
I had to turn my news knob down to 0 because I just want to scream, watch it. Pick any of the subjects. It's I don't know. I call it the puppet show. I don't watch any of it anymore.
Oh, it's a joke. I mean, the Democrats are not happy until they put Trump in prison. Now, what's this going to accomplish? Nothing. And they spend all this money and taxpayer money doing what? And we don't even know and Biden, he can't even put a sentence together. And he's involved in all kinds of stuff that the Democrats are hiding, or I don't know what to believe anymore. It's just all wrong. And our millennials today, it's just different, you know. They don't care anything about what we do either, and
That's
that
right.
concerns me.
That's right. Yeah. Well, hang in there. Hang in there.
Yeah, you just got to hang
Gotta
in
hit
there.
the bottom soon and go back up. That's what I keep telling myself. And
Well, I guess the only way we can go is up. We can't get much lower than where we are now.
and don't push our luck, please.
And if
Hey,
it
let me
starts,
ask a quick question. Does the museum or anyone have a TR3 or any kind of a 2-inch video machine?
I have 2 quad machines, the Ampex, the VR 2000 or
Yeah.
I've got two quad machines,
Okay.
and I've got that 2-inch. It's not a quad; it's a helical scan thing that they used in aircraft for showing movies.
660 or 1500? 660.
Yeah, I just wondered if the museum collected stuff like that.
Yeah, I think so. In fact, I'm not sure. I bought 2 quad machines through Steve up there in the museum up there.
Well, I don't have one, but I do have a big golden reel of Ampex tape that I hate to throw in the trash.
Don't do that.
I won't. And
I
also
know.
had one of those drone TV cameras and transmitters too.
Of all the crazy things there, back in the day when they were using 2-inch quad machines, you could get the recording kit had a finite life to it, like 700 hours or something. And now today, if you can get anybody to transfer tapes, they charge like $300 or $400 a half an hour or whatever to transfer them. But there's a guy here in Knoxville. Oh, God, here I go with names. He's up in years, but he worked for
Larry.
Apex. What's that?
Larry. I'm not sure he's in Knoxville.
Oh, you're talking about Larry Odom.
Yeah.
No, Larry is a brilliant guy, but he's a nut. You know, I think he hates me now. But not him. I don't know that he can refurbish a head, but there's this guy has a weird name, but he worked for Ampex in California along with Eckhart Wilms. It's funny I can remember his name, but the other guy here in Knoxville. And I said, well, regarding these refurbishing the heads on those things, used to cost like $700-800 to do that. Then it was $1,500, and then there's down to like 2 manufacturers that could do this. Well, I asked, what's his name? I said, well, what is there to doing the heads on those? And they're made out of a material, and I can't think of the name of that either. But he knew all about it. And I said, how difficult would it be to refurbish a head? He says, oh no, Julian. He says, you don't understand. He said it takes about $1 million worth of equipment to refurbish the head on it. I still don't understand that. But anyway, I think there's only one place now maybe that can do it. They charge like $3,000 or $4,000 to do a head.
DRS Ahead Technology.
Yeah, it's a head tech out by Rich.
Yep.
Where are they located at? What state?
They're here in San Jose somewhere.
Okay. Well, apparently they're the only ones. And then there's the broadcast store out there. And they claim they refurbish quad machines and stuff.
No, it'd be cheaper to buy an old one, a used one.
He claims that they refurbish them, they sell them. In fact, I got an email from him yesterday.
I know that guy. He's got a whole cadre of freelancers that help him with stuff.
I would say I guess you'd have to, because it's a dying art apparently. But Larry Odom, he's got a lot of machines there, but he got real mad at me one time, and he used to work for Channel 9 up in Kingsport up there, and they said we'd love to hire him. He's qualified and everything. He says, but we can't. His demands are just too high. He wants his own office. Nobody else can go in there. And George DeVault that owned the station, he says, I own the station. I can't give those kind of demands to him. And he said, we'd love to hire him, but we can't.
What?
But he's a fantastic guitarist, but he's just a nut, you know?
People with personality in the television business? No.
Imagine that.
I think talent is a euphemism for another word that starts with A and ends in hole.
Well, I tell you what, growing up, I'm 72 years old now, and I've seen a lot of managers and a lot of people and all of that. And you have to, in fact, there's a guy here in Knoxville that owned half the radio stations at one time, and they meet the last Thursday of every month at Shoney's restaurant. And I'm always invited, which I feel privileged in that, and I get to talk to these guys and Johnny Perkle and all that. And they call me for the Broadcast Engineers Society. I said, well, what am I here? I'm not one of your engineers. He says, no, you're our historian. So I got a job there with him, sort of.
So, Julian, you're in Knoxville?
Yes, sir.
My sister lives in Knoxville, and if I go out there, maybe I'll bring that roll of tape for you.
I'd like to see that. I collect those. Whereabouts does she live in Knoxville?
Where?
Yes.
Okay, I have to look at the address.
What's the name of the street that she lives on?
Well, I knew he was going to ask that. Let me check my contact list real quick.
I might know it. I know Knoxville pretty well. I always do estate and yard sales around. And
how about Royal View Road?
Not familiar with it offhand, but if it's in West Knoxville, she doesn't live far from me.
4100 Royal View Road.
Royal View Road. I'd have to look that up.
Zip code is 37921.
Oh, that's pretty close. I'm 37922.
Okay, it's probably next door.
I think that's part of I'm actually kind of in Concord next to Farragut. Farragut might be one. But if you're here in Knoxville, I've got a broadcast museum per se, but man, it's just pathways through it. But I've got enough to keep you busy for hours. I've got quite a display in there.
Well, I'm coming out to see the solar eclipse in April, so maybe I'll swing down that way. We'll see.
Ooh, I need to get involved in that. I can make some money there. You can get these those little card things to view the sun, to view the eclipse with,
Yeah, I got a bunch of them left from the last one that came through Salem.
If you buy like 1,000 of them, they're like 17 cents a piece, and I can sell them for $3 and $4. Set up. Most of my business is up in Pigeon Forge. There's a lot of tourists that come through there. There's lots of places I can set up on the side of the road there and say viewers, and I'll just sell them for $2 a piece when everybody else is trying to get 8 and 10. I'll make some money there this next April.
Okay, it's April.
Hey, Rich.
April 4th.
Is that sign from Redwood City or Colorado?
Redwood City. This is the sign from the Magnetic Head Lab. And better than that, when they closed the lab, everyone in the lab there signed the back of it.
Oh, really? I love that.
Yeah, that was given to me by a fellow's daughter. I can't think of his name. He was the manager of the Head Lab. And before that career, he was a TWA airline pilot.
Is there an Eckhart Wilms on the back of that thing?
Oh, probably.
There's an Eckhart. I'm still trying to think of the name of the guy that used to engineer tape heads and all of that. He had a real unusual, and I can't think of his name.
Well,
I bet Fred Foast signed that, didn't he?
I don't know if Fred's on here or not. I know Fred. My ability to read cursive has not improved. David Colby and Judy, Glenn Kellogg, Dolores and Bart Bertozzi, Dwayne Beck, someone Sistorn, Lyle and Jean May. We've got RAC and LC, R. Milland, Bobby and Bernie Brennan, maybe, Fran and Gila, I can't read it, Doug and Audrey Robson, Ken and Vivian Parsons, Bob and Roberta Unger. A lot of couples working there.
How about that?
Sue and George Stockton.
Now, did you know most of those people?
I did not. See, my whole problem, I moved here soon enough where I could have known all these people, but I was a naive. I fell off the turnip truck when I came here. I grew up in Red Bluff, California. You were talking about going to the dump to get stuff. The dump was my electronics store.
Yes.
And so when I came to the Valley, I knew nothing. I was a rube. And so I had this idea that I didn't want anything to do with Ampex. I heard they had a union or something. And so I just locked myself out of really knowing a lot of people. And by the time I started learning of these people, I learned of them because they had died. And somebody would talk about him, and I'm like, I should have met that guy. I should have met that. I found out about the Ampex team by going to the what was his name, Ginsburg's memorial service, and I got to meet the other 5 guys there. That was a great moment in my life, a great awakening. I had a girlfriend at the time. She and I were the last 2 people to walk through the Ampex Museum.
You know, when we lived in Seattle up there, Boeing was the major manufacturer up there, Boeing aircraft. And down there near the World's Fair site, down there, I could walk to it. There was Radar Electric Company. And I think they're still in a business today, and they're kind of like a Newark Electronics now. But they used to have a surplus store, and they sold stuff. And the guy in there liked me. I'd go in there and buy a transistor radio from him or a piece of equipment or something. He'd sell it to me for 50 cents or $1. This is like 1962, 1963.
Wow. I was living there in 63 and 64 at Fort Lewis. I was just a little brat. My dad was in the Army. So I'm familiar with the area when you talk about those things, but I haven't been back there in a very long time. So I obtained this at the Ampex Old Timers Picnic from the man's daughter. And
I'll be darned.
I have tons and tons of documentation and stuff, and I don't even know what to do with it. I have, what was his name? Joe Roizen's archives. Well, archives. It was the contents of his desk drawers.
Did I ever tell you my Roizen story about Caracas?
I think you did, but go ahead.
No, I was down there helping the government convert to color, and I was sitting in the Hotel Intercontinental outdoor dining area one night, and this guy goes lumbering past me, and he goes, "Hey, John, how you doing?" And I said, "Hey, Joe, nice to see you." And he got about 10 steps further on, and he stopped, and he goes, "Ah, crap." And I said, "What's the matter?" He said, "Well, I'm down here representing Thompson." I said, CAM 60, never gonna fly." Poor Joe. That's how we found out that he was out.
No. Yeah, I never met Joe Roizen, but I have never met a single human being that didn't have nothing but nice things to say about the man. I have in my collection somewhere, I have his air sick bag collection. When he traveled the world, he collected air sick bags from the airplanes. It's in my storage locker somewhere. If I ever lose the storage lockers, that'll be the greatest tragedy right there.
You know, you're talking of, that's an unusual collection. I remember almost 20 years ago, I was on the Fox television. They labeled me a super collector at one time. But they would go and look at people's collections and what they collected. You know, what's the strangest thing you've ever heard about someone collecting? And this one individual that they interviewed one time, you know, like when you back in the 50s, 60s, when they'd scrub a toilet or sanitize it, it'd have this paper band on the toilets. It'd say "sanitized by." Yeah. This guy collected those bands off the toilet seats. I mean, you talk about I've heard of people collecting weird stuff and string and rubber bands, but collecting those labels that they sanitize toilets with. What a collection that might. Now, I imagine, how would you sell a collection like that? Who would want to inherit it, you know?
You never know. That's true. Yep. So you have to make sure when you have a collection of really screwy stuff, you've got to label it what it is, because somebody will find that, they'll just throw it in the dumpster and it's gone. You know?
I do estate sales as much as I can, and it's amazing. Of course, most estate sales, it's older people, they're retiring, they died, they're moving into nursing homes, and the kids want to empty the house out as fast as they can and sell the real estate. Well, I found all kinds of neat stuff, and you go back in their personal stuff. And in fact, I was in Chicago here a few weeks ago, and I was looking for Stern Manufacturing up there. I'm in the coin machine business, and Stern up there builds pinball machines, you know. Well, anyway, on my way there's this big sign that said estate sale. And this guy, apparently, we found it just by accident, like to have never found. I've never seen 5 or 6 streets together that every house had the same address. I mean, a different name on the street, but they had the same numbers going up the street. And we like to have never found it, but we did. This guy collected cars, and he had this huge garage in the back, which is unusual for Chicago suburbs. And, you know, a great big garage with a 17-foot ceiling, and they never threw out anything. That basement, they were just giving stuff away. I found a March 26, 1914. It was the opening day for the San Francisco Seals baseball team. You know, the history of it, it didn't last long, but a year or two. But I've got the opening day, and I found out there's only 5 or 6 of these things known to exist, and they're worth quite a bit of money. So that's going to pay for my Chicago trip. But I just found it in a box of, he had a Rubbermaid tub there full of papers and stuff. I didn't get to go through all of it, but he gave me, I had a police badge in there, and I bought 2 Heathkit monoblock amplifiers, that, and another Heathkit item, $10 for the pair. That's going to pay for my trip up there. But you know, we just filled our van up with stuff there. They had all kinds of neat stuff, but you never know. You find these old guys' houses, you know, and the kids don't know what it is, and they just give this stuff away, and you find some interesting stuff there, and a good part of it is stuff that I've rescued from the trash.
Yep.
That's what happened to most of my TV stuff. Parents died, and the state people came in and just cleaned the house.
And a lot of it does get destroyed, and it's happening every day.
Sad.
It's that. Well, when you come to Knoxville, you be sure and get in touch with me if you can. I'm easy to find. And oh, if you want to see anything on me or anything, we had a newscaster here in Knoxville named Alan Williams, and that's Alan, that's spelled A-L-A-N. But anyway, he was Channel 8 News. I've known him for 40 years. I used to fix his TV sets and sell him TVs. But he always did stories on me. But he has a thing called Alan Williams Going My Way, and he interviews various people on various items, you know, and all kinds of neat stuff. But he's done several on me. I did one with him on microphones and some on television and some radio. But if you go to YouTube, type in Alan Williams Going My Way, the Collector.
Got it.
And if you type that, you won't see but about 2. It's a short blurb of it, about 2.5 minutes long, but that's about 2% of what I own. And that's showing some of my microphones. I've got over 1,000 microphones. And
wow.
And I told a guy the other day I won something on a government auction there. I said, you know, if I were to ever do something stupid, you know, and then they put my mugshot on TV that we're looking for this man. Who is he? Help us, you know. I'd say their switchboard would catch on fire. I said, oh, that's Julian Burke. Oh, I'm well known here in Knoxville. And every time I'm at a flea market or even estate sales, oh, you're the TV man. Oh, you're the radio man. Or, you know, everybody knows me here. So I'm not too hard to find. So now I got to make sure I don't do anything stupid out there. Oh man, I hate to think about it. But anyway.
Yeah, I'll look you up.
That's good. It's getting kind of late, and I've got to hit church tomorrow there and the choir and stuff. And
all right.
But anyway, hey, I had a good time tonight. I hope you guys did, and I thank Steve for this. This is the neatest thing, you know. We can sit. It's kind of a loose end tonight, but I think we actually learned a lot here tonight on some stuff. That's my curiosity there. I've revisited some subjects here tonight, so I'm going to enjoy doing that. So anyway, I guess I better sign off here. Anyway, it's great chatting with you guys. But keep in touch. Good night, guys.